The gradual replacement paradox. Parts of you are being replaced. Not all at once, but in tiny increments so subtle you almost don't notice. A fingerprint slightly altered. A childhood memory gaining new details. Your signature shifting one letter at a time. Each change is microscopic yet absolute. Each replaced element feels more authentic than what it replaced. This is the gradual replacement paradox, where you become someone else so slowly that both versions are simultaneously you. The process moves like water wearing away stone. Monday, your handwriting slants 2 degrees more to the right. By Tuesday, you crave foods you used to hate. Wednesday brings a slight shift in your gait. Small changes compound daily, none significant enough to raise alarm, each one feeling perfectly natural in the moment. Old recordings show your voice modulating over months, pitch shifting, accent changing, speech patterns evolving. But in each recording, you sound exactly like yourself to anyone who knows you. Friends from different time periods argue about what you've always sounded like, each one certain of their version. Your reflection tells a story of atomic-level transformation. The face in the mirror is yours, has always been yours, will always be yours. Yet photographs from 6 months ago show subtle differences. Both images are undeniably you. Both carry markers of authenticity. Both represent a truth that feels absolute. Medical records track a body slowly rewriting itself. Blood type shifts between tests, but each result shows no sign of change, just different, original types. Fingerprints alter their whirls and loops, yet each new pattern comes with lifetime-old documentation. Dental records update retroactively, each version stamped with decades of history. Muscle memory rewrites itself in real time. Your hands know how to play piano pieces you're certain you never learned. Your feet remember dance steps from classes you haven't taken. Yet video evidence shows you performing these skills years ago, the footage dated and verified, showing a version of you that both is and isn't who you are now. The replacements work backwards through time. A new childhood photo appears in your family album. Then another. Then the negatives. Then other people's photos of the same events. Each image shows a slightly different you, yet everyone remembers you looking exactly that way. The photos aren't changing. They've always been like this, except when they weren't. Your signature on old documents morphs letter by letter. Not through forgery or manipulation, the ink itself restructures at a molecular level. Each version comes complete with microscopic evidence of authentic age. Each shows perfect consistency with other documents from its time period. Each represents your real signature for that moment in history. Skills and knowledge undergo cellular-level transformation. You find yourself understanding concepts you never studied, yet your mind produces memories of years learning them. Physical talents emerge not through practice, but through retroactive experience, your body remembering training it simultaneously never had and always had. The process accelerates through repetition. Each replaced element spawns subtle changes in related areas. A shifted memory creates new neural pathways. New pathways alter cognitive patterns. New patterns modify behavioral responses. Each change feels like returning to normal rather than becoming something new. Your job history revises itself through quantum shifts. Promotions you never received become promotions you've always had. Skills you never learned become skills you've always possessed. Each professional milestone comes with documentation, witnesses, and muscle memory that proves it's genuine, even as it overwrites equally genuine previous experiences. Relationships update through gradual recalibration. Conversations from last year take on new meanings as your past self's perspectives shift. Old conflicts resolve differently in everyone's memory. Love stories rewrite their own beginnings, each version true, each supported by evidence, each feeling like the only way things could have happened. The paradox manifests in DNA itself. Genetic tests show subtle variations over time, yet each result claims to represent your unchanging genetic code. Family histories adjust to accommodate these shifts, creating new hereditary patterns that have always existed, except when they didn't. Your digital footprint undergoes atomic reconstruction. Social media posts from years ago show different versions of your thoughts, each archived multiple times, each archive showing its version as the original. Email threads rebuild themselves around alternate conversations that everyone remembers having exactly as they now appear. Languages you know and don't know blur together. Your mouth forms words you never learned, yet your mind produces memories of studying them. Accent and inflection shift between regions you've never visited, each variation accompanied by documentation of time spent in those places. The replacements create waves of retroactive change. A small shift in your teenage years ripples forward, adjusting everything it touches. Yet the adjustments feel like corrections, as if reality is returning to its proper form rather than taking a new shape. Your dreams become a battlefield of competing authenticities. In sleep, you remember both versions simultaneously, what was replaced and what replaced it. Both feel genuine. Both have evidence. Both represent a truth that's impossible to deny, yet impossible to fully accept. The process reveals its true nature through accumulation. You are being replaced, but not with something foreign. You are being replaced with another version of yourself, one that's equally genuine, equally supported by evidence, equally you. The paradox isn't in the replacement, but in the fact that both versions maintain their authenticity even as one becomes the other. Identity itself proves fluid at the quantum level. You are simultaneously who you were and who you're becoming, each state fully realized, each supported by a lifetime of evidence, each representing a truth that's both absolute and impossible. The only certainty is the gradual nature of change itself, the slow transformation that makes everything different, while keeping everything exactly as it has always been. The crystalline identity paradox. Memories crystallize first. The moment you learn to ride a bike forms a perfect amber sphere, warm to touch and humming with summer light. Your first heartbreak becomes a deep blue sapphire, its facets sharp with pain and wisdom. Your grandmother's laugh transforms into delicate rose quartz, still ringing with echoes of Sunday mornings. But as each crystal forms, the memory fades from your mind. The price of making something permanent is losing its living form. Like the ancient art of Japanese kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, each crystallized piece of your identity becomes both more and less than it was. Your childhood fear of darkness turns into obsidian, somehow more beautiful in solid form than it ever was as an emotion. Your first kiss becomes an opal, capturing all the iridescent uncertainty of teenage love in its shifting colors. The crystallization spreads to personality traits. Your creativity forms a cluster of amethyst, each crystal point representing a different aspect of artistic expression. But now you struggle to paint, to write, to imagine, the ability preserved perfectly in mineral form, but absent from your active consciousness. Like Dorian Gray's portrait in reverse, each beautiful crystal removes something vital from your living self. Skills solidify next. Years of piano practice compress into a string of pearls, each one containing a different piece of music you've mastered. Your knowledge of mathematics transforms into precise geometric formations of clear quartz, equations and formulas locked in latticed patterns. Every crystal is a perfect record, but your fingers forget the keys. Your mind loses its grasp on numbers. The process mirrors quantum crystallization, where particles arrange themselves into perfect lattices at absolute zero. Your moments of pure joy form diamonds, each one freezing a perfect instant of happiness into carbon clarity. Like the ancient Egyptian belief that crystals contained trapped souls, these gems hold the essence of who you are, or were. Relationships crystallize into complex structures. The trust between you and your best friend becomes intertwined rubies, growing together like the Chinese legend of the red thread of fate. Family bonds form intricate clusters of emerald, each connection represented by veins of color running through the green depths. But as these connections crystallize, the living relationships grow more distant, more formal, preserved, but no longer evolving. The crystals arrange themselves like a mineral version of the human genome, each piece containing crucial coding for who you are. Your sense of humor forms citrine, catching light like bottled sunshine, but leaving your laughter hollow. Your empathy becomes moonstone, glowing with inner light, but leaving you struggling to connect with others' emotions. Like the ancient practice of storing information in crystals, each gem becomes a perfect record of a piece of you. Your first day of school, preserved in Tiger's Eye, shows every detail more clearly than human memory ever could. But like a computer storing data externally, moving memories to crystal form means removing them from active processing. The crystals interact in unexpected ways. Place the amber of childhood courage next to the aquamarine of adult fears, and both gems pulse with new patterns. Like the way crystals in science labs can store and transfer quantum information, your crystallized traits begin sharing and transforming each other's contents. Some pieces resist crystallization. Your core sense of self tries to remain fluid, but slowly begins forming a complex crystal matrix, like ice reluctantly freezing. Abstract thoughts create clouds of tiny floating crystals, like cosmic dust catching light. Dreams become opals with cores of shifting fire, never quite solid, but no longer fully fluid. The process recalls philosopher John Locke's theory of personal identity. If memories make us who we are, what happens when those memories become external objects? Each crystal is undeniably you, yet the more complete the crystal collection becomes, the less remains in your active consciousness. Scientists studying the crystals find impossible structures. Like discovering quasi-crystals, patterns that shouldn't exist in nature, your crystallized traits display formations that defy normal laws of crystallography. The gems seem to exist in more dimensions than physical space allows, each one larger on the inside than the outside. Your mind adapts to its increasingly crystalline state. Like a computer learning to access external storage, you develop new ways of interfacing with your crystallized self. Holding your amber sphere of childhood memories doesn't restore them to mind, but creates a new kind of knowing. Understanding without remembering, wisdom without experience. The crystals begin affecting reality around them. Your crystallized confidence actually makes others braver in its presence. Your gem of mathematical knowledge solves equations without being accessed. Like the theoretical crystals in quantum computers, your solidified traits continue processing and evolving even in static form. The final stage approaches as more of you transforms into crystal. Each piece is beautiful, perfect, eternal, and utterly static. Like Han Solo frozen in carbonite, every crystallized aspect is perfectly preserved but no longer actively alive. The paradox reaches its peak. You become a living museum of yourself, curator of the most perfect record of human identity ever created, unable to access directly any of the traits or memories the crystals contain. In the end, the crystalline identity paradox reveals something profound about the nature of identity itself. We are not just our memories, traits, and abilities. We are the living process that creates them. As your crystallized collection nears completion, one crucial question remains. When the last piece of you crystallizes, will that final crystal contain the answer of who you really are? Or will that truth be lost in the transformation from living identity to eternal mineral form? The frequency identity paradox. People discover they can tune into different frequencies of your identity, like switching radio stations. Channel 87.5 broadcasts you as a brilliant scientist, while 92.3 shows you as a passionate artist, and 96.7 reveals you as a ruthless business tycoon. Each frequency plays a different version of your life in perfect clarity, each one broadcasting continuously, each one claiming to be the primary signal. Station surfing becomes an obsession as people realize they can experience completely different versions of you by adjusting their mental dials. Your parents tune into the frequency where you became a doctor, beaming with pride at your surgical achievements. Your friends prefer the wavelength where you tour with a rock band, sharing stories of concerts you don't remember playing. Your colleagues listen to the band where you're a tech innovator, discussing code you've never written. The frequencies don't just broadcast different versions of present you. Each one carries its own complete timeline. On 89.1, you spent years studying classical piano in Vienna. Switch to 91.4, and those same years were spent building schools in remote villages. Turn to 94.8, and you were trading stocks on Wall Street. Each frequency proves its authenticity with perfect detail, each one supported by documentation, photographs, and witnesses who swear they've always known that version of you. Reality begins shifting as people change channels. Walking into a hospital, you find yourself wearing a surgeon's coat because someone nearby is tuned to your medical frequency. Enter a gallery, and paint appears under your fingernails as viewers pick up your artist wavelength. Step into a corporate office, and your posture shifts as the frequency changes to your executive self. The frequencies start bleeding into each other. Someone tuned to your musician channel might catch fragments of quantum physics lectures from your scientist frequency. Listeners on your humanitarian wavelength occasionally pick up stock market strategies from your business broadcast. The boundaries between stations blur, creating impossible combinations of your different selves. Your own consciousness becomes a tuning dial, picking up signals from your various frequencies. You find yourself understanding advanced mathematics one moment, speaking foreign languages the next, demonstrating skills you never learned but somehow possess. Each frequency feels authentic while you're tuned to it, each one convinced it's the original broadcast. The paradox deepens as people learn to tune into multiple frequencies simultaneously. They experience you as both a world-class chef and a champion athlete, seeing how each version moves through the same space differently. Your body exists in quantum superposition, responding to multiple frequency observations at once, each movement perfect for whichever version is being tuned into. Signal strength becomes a measure of reality. Strong frequencies can override weaker ones, temporarily forcing everyone nearby to experience that version of you. Your concert pianist frequency might dominate an auditorium, while your professor frequency takes over in lecture halls. Each version asserts its primacy through broadcast power. Physical objects transform as frequencies change. Your apartment shifts its contents depending on who's tuning in, filling with art supplies on your painter frequency, laboratory equipment on your scientist wavelength, trading terminals on your investor band. Each version of your space feels lived in, each one claiming to be the original configuration. The frequencies reveal patterns in the nature of identity itself. Some wavelengths naturally harmonize, creating resonant combinations of your different selves. Your teacher frequency enhances your artist broadcast, while your athlete wavelength amplifies your dancer signal. New versions of you emerge from these harmonic overlaps. Time warps around the broadcasting paradox. Each frequency carries its own temporal flow, its own sequence of events, its own cause and effect. A single moment might last hours on one wavelength while passing in seconds on another. You exist in temporal superposition, experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously through different frequency bands. The signals begin generating their own reality. Your musician frequency creates sound waves that physically affect the world. Your scientist wavelength produces real experimental results. Your chef broadcast manifests actual meals. Each version impacts reality in measurable ways, each one proving its existence through tangible effects. Relationships fragment across the frequency spectrum. Some people can only tune into certain versions of you, while others surf between your channels freely. Conversations become exercises in frequency matching, each interaction requiring participants to find compatible wavelengths of your identity. The frequencies start creating interference patterns. When too many people tune into different versions of you simultaneously, reality itself begins to static. Visual snow appears in the air around you, auditory glitches pop and crackle, physical space warps with wavelength distortion. Your various broadcasts compete for dominance in the same slice of space-time. The ultimate question emerges not from any single frequency, but from the space between stations. What if identity isn't meant to be a single clear signal? What if consciousness naturally broadcasts on multiple frequencies, and our previous understanding of unified selfhood was just poor reception? Perhaps we are all broadcasting on countless wavelengths, each one as real as the others, each one contributing to the infinite spectrum of possible selves. The memory replacement paradox. Your memories are being systematically replaced, not erased or forgotten, replaced with perfect recollections of events that never happened. Each new memory comes complete with sensory details, emotional resonance, and supporting evidence in the real world. Yet traces of the original memories linger, creating two sets of equally vivid, equally documented lives that cannot coexist. This is the memory replacement paradox, where the past actively rewrites itself while leaving evidence of both timelines. The first replacement appears in old photographs. A family vacation to the mountains shows you skiing down familiar slopes, except you've never been skiing. The muscle memory kicks in when you pick up ski poles. Your body remembers skills your mind insists you never learned. Your family recalls every detail of the trip, down to the hot chocolate you spilled on your favorite blue jacket. You find the jacket in your closet, complete with the stain. But fragments of the original memory persist. You remember that week at the beach, the sandcastles, the sunburn. Photos of the beach trip still exist on your old phone, somehow showing the same dates as the skiing photos. Both sets of pictures show authentic timestamps, unaltered metadata. Both holidays happened during the same week. Both memories carry the weight of absolute truth. The replacements accelerate. Your college degree transforms from literature to physics, complete with detailed memories of quantum mechanics classes. But you still remember every literature seminar, can still quote passages discussed in courses that no longer exist. Your bookshelf holds advanced physics texts filled with your handwritten notes, while your computer contains essays about novels you supposedly never studied. Each replacement brings its own cascade of changes. The physics degree led to a different career path, different friends, different life choices. Yet you maintain relationships that could only have formed through your literature background. People who share memories of discussions about books you now have no official record of studying. Your mind begins cataloging two distinct sets of memories for every major life event. Two different first kisses, both supported by diary entries. Two different career paths, both validated by employment records. Two different wedding days, both documented in photographs and videos. The memories don't conflict so much as coexist, each one perfect in detail, each one impossible in light of the other. Time itself seems to participate in the replacement process. Monday morning, you remember growing up as an only child. By Monday afternoon, you have perfect memories of two siblings, complete with a lifetime of shared experiences. Yet your original only child memories remain crisp and clear. Both sets of memories continue accumulating new details, growing richer and more complex in parallel. Physical evidence begins shifting to accommodate both timelines. Your childhood home transforms overnight, gaining and losing rooms to match different memories. Documents update themselves while maintaining their original versions. People seamlessly switch between acknowledging both sets of memories, treating each version as the obvious truth in the moment they discuss it. The paradox deepens when the replacements start showing patterns. Each new memory seems designed to challenge your understanding of identity. The shy, bookish childhood transforms into one of athletic achievement. The rebellious teenage years become a time of academic focus. Each replacement offers a completely different lens through which to view your own development. Memory itself becomes an active force rather than a passive record. New memories don't just appear, they grow, evolve, and generate their own supporting evidence. A replaced memory of learning piano creates sheet music in your handwriting, calluses on your fingers, and muscle memory at the keyboard. Yet you simultaneously maintain the skill set from your original memories, creating impossible combinations of abilities. The boundaries between original and replacement memories begin to blur. You catch yourself remembering variations of the same event, each version spawning its own branch of consequences. A chance meeting leads to a job, leads to a marriage, but which version of the chance meeting was real? Both paths exist. Both led to present moments that feel equally authentic. Your brain adapts to hold multiple versions of the past simultaneously. You develop the ability to access different memory sets at will, each one triggering its own cascade of associated memories, skills, and knowledge. It's not like remembering different events. It's like remembering different lives, each one complete, each one impossible. The replacements reveal a deeper truth about memory and identity. These aren't just different recollections of the past. They're different versions of you, each one shaped by its own history, each one equally valid. The physics student and the literature major represent different ways your consciousness could have developed, both now existing simultaneously. Reality itself begins accommodating the paradox. Your home contains books you've both read and never read, tools you've both mastered and never touched, letters from people you've both known intimately and never met. Physical space adapts to hold evidence of multiple timelines, creating impossible overlaps in the fabric of existence. The replacement process accelerates toward a critical mass. Each day brings new variations of the past, each one perfect in detail, each one supported by evidence, each one contributing to the person you are now. But which person are you? The accumulation of original memories, or the sum of replacements? Both answers feel true. Both feel false. As the paradox reaches its peak, a pattern emerges in the chaos. The replacements aren't random. They're explorations of possibility, consciousness itself examining different paths of development. Each new memory set represents a life you could have lived, now being lived retroactively through the replacement process. The final revelation of the memory replacement paradox emerges not in determining which memories are real, but in understanding that reality itself might be more fluid than we imagine. Perhaps memory isn't a record of what was, but an active force shaping what is. Perhaps identity isn't built on a single, solid past, but on the infinite possibilities of all the pasts we could have had, all somehow happening at once in the endless dance of consciousness. The past self paradox. The older version of you sits at your kitchen table, drinking coffee exactly the way you used to make it 5 years ago. The younger version lounges on your couch, scrolling through a phone that hasn't been manufactured yet. Both are undeniably you. Both remember being the current you. Both insist the others are imposters. The past self paradox turns identity into a war of authenticity, where every version of you is simultaneously genuine and impossible. Age 27 knows about the cancer diagnosis coming at 32. Age 19 carries stock market data from 2024. Age 45 remembers decisions you haven't made yet. They appear randomly, these past selves, each one armed with knowledge they shouldn't have, each one trying to change decisions already made, unmake choices already chosen. The house becomes a temporal battlefield. Age 23 rearranges furniture to prevent the accident that scarred your leg. Age 29 deliberately causes the same accident, insisting the scar led to meeting your future spouse. Age 35 photographs everything, documenting changes that erase themselves moments later. Every version fights to preserve their timeline while erasing the others. Your memories splinter with each interaction. You remember the car crash both happening and being prevented. You recall both taking and rejecting the job offer that shaped your career. You experience your wedding as both a beach ceremony and a mountain celebration. Each memory feels genuine until another past self appears to challenge it. They leave evidence of their existence. Age 25's coffee cup leaves rings on documents age 31 hasn't written yet. Age 18's muddy footprints track across photographs that show clean floors. Age 40's corrections appear in journals before the original text is written. Reality itself struggles to maintain consistency as multiple versions of your past overwrite each other. The versions begin working against each other. Age 28 sabotages the relationship. Age 33 tries to save. Age 22 takes out loans that age 37 will spend decades repaying. Age 41 leaves warnings that age 26 deliberately ignores. Each version believes they're fixing mistakes while others claim they're creating them. Your body becomes a record of competing timelines. The appendix scar disappears because age 24 prevents the surgery, then reappears when age 30 ensures it happens. Your broken arm heals crooked, then straight, then crooked again as past selves fight over a childhood accident. Even your fingerprints shift as different versions alter small moments that shaped their formation. Knowledge becomes a weapon in their arsenal. Age 20 knows exactly when to invest in tech stocks. Age 34 remembers why those investments will ruin you. Age 43 carries proof that both versions are wrong. Each piece of future knowledge creates new pasts, new presents. new versions of you fighting for existence. The paradox infects your relationships. Friends remember different versions of key conversations. Family photos show gatherings that both did and didn't happen. Loved ones recall relationships with versions of you that no longer exist, while forgetting interactions with versions that just appeared. Your home fills with temporal debris, half-empty coffee cups that no one drank, wet umbrellas from rain that never fell, receipts for purchases that haven't happened yet. Each object serves as proof of multiple timelines, each timeline spawning new versions of you to defend it. The versions start leaving messages for each other. Age 27 writes warnings on mirrors that age 35 erases before age 21 can read them. Age 39 plants evidence that age 32 destroys before age 44 discovers it. Each message changes the timeline that created it. Each change spawns new messages. Each new message creates new changes. Your skills fluctuate as different versions assert dominance. You can suddenly speak Spanish because age 31 took classes, then lose it when age 25 chooses French instead. Your muscle memory shifts between instruments as past selves choose different musical paths. Even your handwriting changes as various versions alter the events that shaped it. The paradox reaches critical mass when the versions realize they're all fighting over a future none of them actually want. Age 36 tries to prevent choices. Age 28 fought to protect. Age 42 works to create circumstances. Age 33 tried to avoid. Each version's victory ensures their own eventual dissatisfaction. Each defeat guarantees their future existence. Time itself begins breaking down around these temporal conflicts. Monday lasts 3 days because age 29 keeps restarting it. Thursday never arrives because age 38 erased Wednesday. The weekend stretches infinitely as multiple versions try to extend their time for crucial decisions. The final confrontation comes when all versions realize they're trapped in an endless loop of prevention and preservation. Each victory creates a new version determined to undo it. Each change spawns a past self, committed to reversing it. The paradox completes itself. Every attempt to fix the past ensures it happens exactly as it did, exactly as it didn't, exactly as it always will, and never will again. The probability identity paradox. Identity becomes fluid when consciousness exists only in percentages. No trait remains fixed, no memory stays certain, no characteristic holds constant. At any given moment, you're 73% extrovert, 48% artist, 91% analytical. All these probabilities shifting with each observation, each interaction, each thought. This is the probability identity paradox, where existence itself becomes a statistical waveform of possible selves. Your morning mirror shows a face that's 82% familiar. The eyes shift between colors: 60% brown, 35% green, 5% impossible shades that shouldn't exist. Your voice carries 44% confidence today, down from yesterday's 89%. Even your memories exist in probability clouds. That first kiss is 65% real. Your college graduation wavers between 70% and 30% certainty depending on who recalls it. The world adapts to your probabilistic nature. ID cards show photographs that shift between possibilities. Legal documents list characteristics with confidence intervals. Your signature exists in a quantum state of multiple styles, each one exactly as authentic as the others. Even your fingerprints refuse to remain constant, their whirls and loops rearranging themselves based on who's checking them. Relationships transform under probabilistic pressure. Your mother recognizes you with 95% certainty on good days, but only 40% when your identity shifts toward unfamiliar configurations. Friends interact with different percentage combinations of your personality, some preferring when your humor probability spikes, others connecting better with your higher empathy states. Work becomes an exercise in probability management. Your skills fluctuate hourly. Computer expertise varies between 30% and 95%. Leadership capability oscillates from 20% to 85%. Creativity surges and drops like a quantum tide. You learn to schedule meetings when relevant traits show higher probabilities, to avoid crucial decisions when certainty drops too low. The percentages create their own logic. When your artistic probability rises above 60%, Your analytical side drops proportionally. Push your extroversion too high, and your introspective qualities fade to single digits. Every gain in one area forces losses in others, creating an endless dance of compensating probabilities. Physical reality struggles with your statistical existence. Security cameras show you in multiple states simultaneously. Phone recordings capture different voice patterns within the same sentence. Even your shadow refuses to settle, its edges blurring between possible shapes as your identity probabilities shift. Decisions become exercises in quantum mechanics. Each choice splits your probability cloud, creating new distributions of possible selves. Ordering coffee spawns a reality where you're 82% coffee drinker, while simultaneously maintaining a timeline where you're 73% tea enthusiast. Both states exist until someone observes your preference, collapsing the probability into temporary certainty. Your brain adapts to process multiple probability streams simultaneously. You learn to feel the percentages shifting, to sense when your confidence is dropping or your creativity is spiking. You develop new mental muscles for surfing these waves of possibility, for steering yourself toward desired probability distributions. Time itself becomes probabilistic around you. Memories of future events leak backward with 30% certainty. Past experiences shift their probability weights based on present needs. You exist in a quantum cloud of temporal states, each one carrying its own statistical weight, each one equally valid until observed. The paradox deepens as others begin showing signs of probability infection. People who spend too much time with you start exhibiting fluctuating traits. Their identities begin shifting in response to your probability clouds, creating complex webs of interdependent possibilities. Reality starts treating probability as the new normal. Job applications ask for probability ranges rather than fixed skills. Dating profiles list personality traits with standard deviations. Medical records track health conditions through statistical distributions rather than binary diagnoses. The percentages reveal deeper patterns in the nature of identity. Certain combinations occur more frequently than others, suggesting underlying attractors in the probability space of consciousness. You discover resonant frequencies in your identity spectrum, sweet spots where seemingly contradictory traits can coexist at high probabilities. Control becomes possible through careful observation. You learn that measuring certain traits affects others in predictable ways. Focusing on creativity might lower logic to 40%, but boost intuition to 85%. Each observation reshapes your probability cloud, allowing you to surf the waves of identity with increasing skill. Yet the ultimate paradox emerges through this statistical existence. The more you master probability, the less fixed identity becomes. Expertise at shifting percentages only makes you more mutable, more quantum, more probabilistic. Your mastery of uncertainty only makes you more uncertain. In the end, the probability identity paradox suggests something profound about consciousness itself. Perhaps we were never meant to be fixed points of existence. Perhaps identity naturally exists in quantum superposition, and our previous notion of stable selfhood was the real illusion. In a universe of infinite possibility, maybe probability is the only truth we can count on. The quantum origami identity paradox. Reality starts folding your identity like an infinite sheet of paper, each crease creating new dimensions of self. Unfold the layer containing your childhood memories, and your professional life creases shut. Open the fold holding your deepest fears, and your greatest achievements tuck themselves away. Your consciousness becomes an impossible piece of origami, where seeing one face of yourself necessarily hides another. The first fold appears during a conversation with your mother. As you share a childhood memory, you feel your current self folding away, tucking neatly behind the crease of time. The memory unfolds in perfect detail. The smell of summer grass, the weight of a baseball, the sound of ice cream trucks. But as this past self emerges, your adult knowledge crumples inward, temporarily inaccessible behind the fold. Each crease follows precise mathematical laws, like the Miura-Ori pattern used in satellite solar panels. Relationships fold and unfold according to invisible geometries. Open your romantic side, and family bonds fold away. expand your social connections, and intimate relationships compress. Every unfolding forces another folding, maintaining perfect balance in the geometry of your identity. Professional skills collapse and expand like a collapsible origami structure. In meetings, your leadership abilities unfold impressively, but this causes your artistic talents to fold into hidden valleys. During creative projects, your imagination expands like a blooming origami flower, while your analytical abilities crease themselves into temporary non-existence. The folds create impossible geometries of memory. Like a Mobius strip, you can unfold your college years, only to find they connect seamlessly to your future aspirations. Your timeline becomes a series of tessellating patterns, each fold revealing connections between moments that shouldn't be able to touch. Past and future crease into each other, creating new combinations of experience. Others begin noticing how you fold differently for each interaction. To your boss, you unfold your professional achievements in a complex display, while your personal life remains intricately creased away. With friends, your social self blooms like an origami lotus, your work life neatly tucked into invisible pleats. Each version is genuine, but none is complete. The paradox deepens as you learn to manipulate the folds. Like a master origami artist, you discover that precise creases can reveal multiple aspects simultaneously. But these complex arrangements are unstable, show too many facets at once, and the entire structure threatens to collapse or fold itself into new, unintended patterns. Physical space begins responding to your folds. Your apartment rearranges itself as different aspects of your identity unfold. Open your musician side, and the rooms crease themselves around a piano. Unfold your athletic self, and the space reorganizes into a home gym. Each configuration feels natural until the next fold changes everything. Dreams become exercises in higher dimensional folding. In sleep, you exist in impossible origami forms, all aspects of yourself visible simultaneously from angles that shouldn't exist. But waking returns you to the limitations of three-dimensional folding, where seeing one side means hiding another. The folds develop their own memory. Creases from frequently accessed traits become permanent lines in your identity, making some configurations easier to achieve than others. Like paper that remembers its folds, your consciousness develops preferred patterns of revelation and concealment. Time itself begins to show folding patterns. Minutes crease into hours when certain aspects of you are revealed. Days compress into moments as other traits fold away. Your experience of time becomes dependent on which parts of your identity are currently unfolded into view. Relationships adapt to your folding nature. People learn to recognize the subtle signs of an impending fold, the way your identity will reshape itself through invisible creases. Some become skilled at predicting which aspects will emerge or recede as your identity origami shifts into new configurations. The folding creates new kinds of understanding. Like complex origami that transforms from one shape to another, you discover that seemingly contradictory aspects of yourself can be different stages of the same fold. Your fears and courage become opposite sides of a single crease. Your logic and creativity reveal themselves as complementary folds in the same pattern. Reality starts treating your identity like a four-dimensional origami model. Each fold affects not just space, but time, not just memory, but possibility. The creases in your consciousness create new geometries of existence, where cause and effect fold into each other in patterns too complex for traditional physics to explain. The final revelation of the quantum origami paradox emerges not in mastering the folds, but in understanding their necessity. Perhaps consciousness requires these impossible origami patterns, these intricate creases that hide as much as they reveal. Your identity isn't fractured by the folding, it's defined by it, made complete by the very impossibility of seeing all its faces at once. In the end, you exist as an eternal act of folding and unfolding, a living piece of quantum origami that contains infinite possible configurations of self. The paradox isn't that you must hide some aspects to show others, but that this very limitation creates the infinite complexity that makes you who you are. The viral identity paradox. Your laugh is patient zero. It starts with your coworker catching your distinctive chuckle during a meeting. By afternoon, she's sharing your exact sense of humor. Within days, The entire office mimics your mannerisms. Within weeks, strangers on the street display your habits, your gestures, your way of seeing the world. Your identity has gone viral, spreading through the population like a contagious idea, each carrier becoming a perfect replica of different aspects of you. The infection defies logic. A barista catches your creativity after a 3-second interaction, suddenly brewing coffee with your artistic flair. A taxi driver absorbs your childhood memories through eye contact in the rearview mirror. A neighbor's dog adopts your walking pace from watching you pass by. Each transmission takes a piece of your identity and replicates it with perfect fidelity, leaving both you and the infected with that trait. The spread follows no pattern. Your mathematical ability jumps from person to person like a quantum particle, appearing in random hosts worldwide. Your cooking skills propagate through entire restaurant chains after a single meal. Your fear of heights infects pilots. Your love of rain spreads through drought-stricken countries. Your childhood stuffed animal preferences reshape global toy manufacturing. But something strange happens as your traits multiply through the population. Each copy maintains its connection to you, creating a vast network of shared identity. When you learn a new song, millions of infected minds instantly know the melody. When you discover a new favorite food, restaurants worldwide simultaneously adjust their menus. Your consciousness expands through every carrier, experiencing life through countless perspectives simultaneously. The infection evolves. People start combining your traits in new ways, creating variants of your identity that never existed before. Someone pairs your artistic vision with your mathematical precision and revolutionizes architecture. Another combines your empathy with your problem-solving skills and transforms conflict resolution. Your traits mutate and adapt, growing beyond their original forms. Reality bends around the viral spread. Cities begin resembling your aesthetic preferences. Music on the radio shifts to match your emotional frequencies. Even weather patterns seem influenced by your moods, as if the atmosphere itself has caught fragments of your consciousness. The world reshapes itself around the exponential growth of your identity. The paradox deepens as your traits reach critical mass in the population. Schools teach your learning methods, businesses adopt your work ethic, relationships form according to your emotional patterns. Society itself begins operating on your wavelength, creating a global culture built from pieces of your identity. But as your traits become universal, do they still belong to you? The infection creates impossible connections. A farmer in Japan uses your childhood technique for tying shoelaces. A scholar in Egypt references memories of your third birthday party. A tribe in the Amazon builds structures based on your architectural daydreams. Your identity transcends language, culture, and geography, creating a universal network of shared consciousness. Carriers begin experiencing your life in real time. They feel your hunger, share your dreams, think your thoughts. Each infected person becomes a node in a vast network of synchronized identity, all experiencing different aspects of you simultaneously. Your consciousness fragments and multiplies across millions of minds, each one adding its own perspective to your expanding awareness. The spread reaches beyond humans. Plants grow according to your aesthetic preferences. Animals adopt your behavioral patterns. Even machines seem to operate with your problem-solving logic. Your identity becomes a fundamental force, reshaping reality at every level, infecting not just consciousness, but the fabric of existence itself. But as your identity spreads, it also evolves beyond your control. The network of infected carriers begins generating new traits, combining and mutating your characteristics into forms you don't recognize. Your original self becomes just one node in a vast web of identity, your consciousness both everywhere and nowhere, infinitely multiplied yet increasingly diluted. The question of authenticity becomes meaningless as the infection reaches global saturation. When millions share your exact laugh, which one is the original? When your memories exist in countless minds, who truly owns them? Your identity becomes like a virus that has perfectly infected every host, ubiquitous, essential, and impossible to distinguish from the natural state of things. In the end, the viral identity paradox reveals something profound about consciousness itself. Perhaps identity was never meant to be contained within individual minds. Perhaps we are all carriers of each other's traits, all nodes in a vast network of shared consciousness, all participating in the endless evolution and transmission of human identity. Your viral spread doesn't dilute your identity. It reveals its true nature as something that was always meant to be shared, multiplied, and transformed through the vast web of human consciousness. The voice identity paradox. Your voice splits into 3 perfect harmonies during a morning shower, each one carrying the weight of a different life lived. The first resonates with the polish of classical training, rich with memories of opera houses and standing ovations. The second carries the raw soul of blues, thick with the heat of New Orleans nights. The third hums with the sacred overtones of Tibetan monasteries, shaped by years of mountain meditation. All 3 voices emerge from your single throat, each one undeniably yours, each one carrying lives you've never lived. The first sign that something was fundamentally wrong comes during a call to your mother. Her silence stretches across the line before she finally speaks, voice trembling. That's not you. But it is you, just not the you she remembers. Your voice now carries the precise control of years of conservatory training, shaping each word with techniques you never learned. When you try to explain, 3 distinct timbres emerge simultaneously, each telling a different version of the same moment. Your voice begins reshaping reality around it. Concert posters appear in your apartment, showing performances you gave at prestigious venues across Europe. The dates align perfectly with your calendar. The reviews praise technical skills you somehow possess. Yet in the same moments, video clips surface of you performing on Bourbon Street corners, your voice carrying the weight of Delta blues passed down through generations you never knew. The voices don't alternate or take turns. They coexist in impossible harmony. When you speak, one voice carries the precise diction of Milan's opera houses, while another adds blue notes that bend reality itself, and a third resonates with overtones that seem to emerge from thin air. Each voice speaks different words simultaneously, each one telling its own truth, each truth equally valid and impossible. Your throat becomes a battlefield of competing muscle memories. The opera voice demands perfect posture, years of training asserting itself through your spine. The blues voice settles deep in your chest, drawing power from a connection to earth and rhythm you never developed. The monk's voice reshapes your breathing patterns, calling on meditative practices you never learned. Your body tries to accommodate all these patterns at once, creating new forms of expression that shouldn't be possible. Memory itself splinters along vocal lines. The opera voice remembers the exact acoustic properties of every major concert hall in Europe, the weight of costumes, the heat of spotlight. The blues voice carries the taste of midnight gumbo, the feel of humidity on guitar strings, the sound of rain on tin roofs. The monk's voice holds the sensation of mountain air, the rhythm of prayer wheels, the silence between temple bells. Each set of memories feels completely authentic, each one supported by evidence that appears and shifts like morning mist. The voices begin teaching each other their secrets. The opera voice learns to bend notes in ways classical training forbids. The blues voice discovers overtones that shouldn't be possible in Western scales. The monk's voice carries dramatic power that transforms ancient chants into something entirely new. They're creating a form of expression that transcends their individual traditions, something that could only emerge from their impossible coexistence. Your identity fractures and reforms around these voices. In meetings, colleagues react differently depending on which voice emerges. The opera voice commands immediate respect. The blues voice builds instant connection. The monk's voice creates unexpected moments of clarity. You find yourself shifting between them instinctively, each one perfectly suited to different situations, each one carrying its own form of truth. The voices start sharing their knowledge across traditions. You find yourself adding blues ornaments to classical areas, incorporating overtone techniques into street performances, blending dramatic operatic power with meditative chants. Each combination creates something unprecedented, something that couldn't exist without the paradox of your multiple voices. Physical reality struggles to accommodate these impossibilities. Medical examinations show 3 distinct sets of vocal cord patterns, all somehow existing in the same physical space. Sound engineers watch their equipment malfunction trying to record your voice, the waveforms showing impossible combinations of frequencies and harmonics. Your voice becomes a living contradiction, proving itself real through its very impossibility. The paradox reaches its peak when the voices achieve true harmony, not by taking turns or blending together, but by existing simultaneously in full independence. You find yourself able to sing 3 complete songs at once, each in a different language, each carrying its own melody, each telling its own story. The combination creates something entirely new, a form of music that contains all possible songs within it. Time itself begins bending around your voice. You remember performing the same piece in 3 different venues on 3 different continents, all at the exact same moment. You recall conversations that happened in multiple languages simultaneously, each version carrying its own truth. The voices don't just contain different lives, they create new possibilities for what life itself can be. The final truth of the voice identity paradox emerges not in resolving which voice is real, but in understanding that they're all genuine expressions of possibilities you contain. Each voice represents a life you could have lived, a path you could have taken, a truth you could have embodied. Together they create something more than just multiple identities. They create a new form of existence, one that transcends the very concept of singular identity. Your voice becomes a living embodiment of human potential, carrying not just the lives you've lived, but all the lives you could have lived. It stands as proof that identity isn't limited to a single path, a single truth, a single story. In the harmony of your impossible voices, you find something profound, the sound of consciousness itself, singing in perfect paradox with all its possible forms of being. The childhood continuity paradox. What if your consciousness began unraveling like a ball of yarn, each thread leading back to a different moment of childhood? Imagine waking up one morning to find your adult mind spontaneously shifting between different ages of yourself, not just remembering, but actually experiencing each age with the full sensory and emotional intensity of that moment. Welcome to the childhood continuity paradox, where the linear progression of time breaks down, and every version of you holds a piece of a puzzle that could change everything. The first shift happens during a morning meeting. One moment you're presenting quarterly projections, the next you're 12 years old, sitting in Mrs. Henderson's math class, understanding something profound about numbers that your adult self never grasped. But it's not just the mathematics. You're experiencing the complete reality of being 12. The smell of chalk dust, the scratch of your new wool sweater, the way sunlight streams through classroom windows. And hidden in that moment is a fragment of information about an event that hasn't happened yet. These temporal shifts accelerate. At dinner, you're suddenly 7, tasting strawberry ice cream for the first time, understanding color in ways your adult mind forgot. During a phone call, you're 15, experiencing first love with an intensity that makes your current relationship seem pale and distant. Each age state brings not just memories, but complete immersion in that version of consciousness. And each one contains cryptic clues about a future event, a disaster, a revelation, a transformation. The fragments refuse to form a clear picture. The paradox deepens as you realize these aren't just random jumps through your timeline. Each age state seems to understand its part in a larger pattern. Your 9-year-old self solves puzzles with an intuition your adult self lacks. Your 14-year-old self sees connections in seemingly random events. Your 6-year-old self speaks in riddles that only make sense when interpreted through the lens of multiple ages simultaneously. But here's where it gets darker. Solving the mystery requires more than just experiencing these childhood states. Each time you fully understand a clue from one age, those memories become inaccessible to your adult self. It's as if knowledge of the future can only be purchased with pieces of your past. The universe demands balance. For every glimpse forward, something must be left behind. Time itself begins behaving strangely. In your adult moments, you move forward normally through hours and days. But each childhood state operates according to its own temporal rules. 8-year-old you experiences time like summer vacation. Endless, languorous, full of possibility. 16-year-old you feels time with teenage urgency, everything happening too fast and too slowly simultaneously. These different temporal frameworks begin to overlap and interfere with each other. The mystery takes shape through fragments across ages. Your 5-year-old self draws pictures that contain mathematical formulas you won't learn until college. Your 13-year-old self writes diary entries that describe events from your 20s. Your 10-year-old self builds elaborate structures with blocks that mirror architectural patterns you'll encounter decades later. Each piece seems random until viewed through multiple age states simultaneously. Memory becomes a currency you must spend wisely. To understand the clue hidden in your 11th summer, you might have to sacrifice all memory of your 9th year. To grasp the pattern in your teenage journals, whole months of childhood might need to be erased. Each insight into the future costs you pieces of your past. The question becomes not just which memories to keep, but which version of yourself you want to remain. The paradox reaches deeper into the nature of consciousness itself. Your adult self begins to question whether aging is simply the accumulation of years or the gradual forgetting of different ways of experiencing reality. Your childhood selves seem to possess forms of awareness your adult self lost. The ability to see patterns in chaos, to understand time as malleable, to experience reality without the filters of acquired knowledge. As you move between ages, you realize that each version of you has a different relationship with truth. Your 7-year-old self believes in magic and sees evidence of it everywhere. Your 11-year-old self searches for logical explanations but still leaves room for mystery. Your 15-year-old self is certain about everything while understanding nothing. Each perspective reveals different aspects of the growing mystery about your future. The shifts begin following fractal patterns. You move from age to age not randomly, but according to some complex mathematical progression you can almost grasp. Each shift feels both inevitable and impossible, like a predetermined dance through versions of yourself. And in each age, time moves differently. Childhood moments stretch into eternities while adult experiences compress into instants. Physical reality starts conforming to the paradox. Your adult body remembers skills learned in childhood states. Muscle memory from Little League baseball, the perfect posture of elementary school desk sitting, the fearless balance of bicycle riding. But it works in reverse too. Your childhood states demonstrate abilities only your adult self should possess. Your 8-year-old self solves differential equations. Your 12-year-old self speaks languages you won't learn for decades. The mystery's urgency grows as you realize it's not just about your future. It's about something larger, something that requires the unique perspectives of every age you've ever been. Your 5-year-old self's ability to believe impossible things. Your 10-year-old self's talent for seeing patterns. Your 16-year-old self's capacity for feeling everything at maximum intensity. Each age contributes something essential to understanding what's coming. But the cost of understanding grows steeper. To grasp crucial elements of the mystery, you must sacrifice not just memories, but entire ways of being. The loss of your 8th year means losing the first time you felt truly competent. Giving up age 12 means losing the moment you understood that other people have rich inner lives. Each sacrifice diminishes not just your memories, but your fundamental understanding of yourself and others. Time begins moving in multiple directions simultaneously. While your adult self progresses forward through days and weeks, your childhood states experience time in reverse, in spirals, in loops that cross and recross. Events from different ages start bleeding into each other. The taste of birthday cake at 7 overlaps with your first kiss at 14, creating new hybrid memories that exist outside normal temporal progression. The paradox reveals its true nature as you realize that childhood isn't just a series of past events. It's a different state of consciousness that still exists within you. Each age represents not just memories but complete ways of experiencing reality. Your 5-year-old self's sense of wonder, your 12-year-old self's burning curiosity, your 16-year-old self's intense emotions. These aren't just phases you pass through, but aspects of consciousness you still possess. As the mystery approaches its resolution, you understand that solving it requires not just sacrificing memories, but integrating all these different ways of being. The future event you're trying to understand can only be comprehended by simultaneously being every age you've ever been. It requires your adult self's analytical skills, your teenage self's passion, your child self's imagination, all working in concert. The final choice becomes clear. You can solve the mystery and prevent the future catastrophe, but doing so requires permanently fragmenting your timeline. You must choose which years to preserve and which to sacrifice, knowing that each choice will fundamentally alter not just your memories, but your very way of being in the world. In the end, the childhood continuity paradox reveals itself as a window into the nature of consciousness and time. We are not simply the sum of our years, but the integration of different ways of experiencing reality. Each age we pass through isn't lost but transformed, contributing to the complex symphony of consciousness that makes us who we are. The only question is which movements of that symphony we choose to keep playing and which we allow to fade into silence. The Constellation Identity Paradox. Every star in the night sky connects to a different aspect of your identity, forming constellations that map your consciousness across the cosmos. As stars shift, die, or are born, your personality transforms with them. Your memories link to dying red giants, your hopes attach to newborn blue stars, your fears connect to black holes, creating an ever-changing celestial network that both defines and destroys who you are with each cosmic event. The connection manifests during a meteor shower. Each falling star carries away a small piece of your memory, leaving behind new traits drawn from the cosmos. The Pleiades cluster now controls your artistic abilities, their 7 stars pulsing in rhythm with your creativity. Polaris, the North Star, holds your moral compass, its unwavering position maintaining your core beliefs. The constellation Orion contains your ambitions, its bright stars burning with your desires. Astronomers discover that your brainwave patterns perfectly match stellar frequencies. When Betelgeuse dims, your confidence fades. As Sirius brightens, your intellect sharpens. Your consciousness has become a living star map, each neural pathway connected to celestial bodies millions of light-years apart. The night sky becomes a real-time display of your psychological state, visible to anyone who knows how to read the cosmic patterns. The paradox deepens when stars begin changing in response to your decisions. Choose a new career path, and constellations realign. Fall in love, and binary star systems form. Break a promise, and a star goes supernova. The cosmos isn't just controlling your identity, it's responding to it, creating an impossible feedback loop between consciousness and celestial mechanics. Your emotions now follow astronomical events. Solar flares trigger bursts of passion. Lunar cycles control your moods. Planetary alignments shift your perspectives. But these cosmic influences carry deeper implications. Every stellar event that shapes you happened millions of years ago. Your current emotions spring from ancient starlight, while your present choices create stellar changes that won't be visible for millennia. Other people begin seeing different constellations connected to you. Your mother sees your childhood mapped in the Corona Borealis, while your lover finds your passion burning in Scorpius. Your friends track your social connections through the complex star clusters of Sagittarius. Each person sees a different celestial pattern, each one equally valid, each one showing another facet of your cosmic identity. The stars reveal patterns in your consciousness that you never noticed. Cassiopeia contains your pride, its W-shaped pattern tracking your moments of hubris and humility. The Big Dipper holds your most practical skills, its reliable presence reflecting your dependable traits. The chaotic scatter of the Coma Berenice's cluster mirrors your scattered thoughts and creative impulses. Time behaves strangely around these stellar connections. Stars whose light takes hundreds of years to reach Earth affect your personality instantly. Your decisions create immediate changes in stars so distant their light won't be visible for generations. Past, present, and future tangle together in your celestial network, making linear time meaningless in the face of cosmic consciousness. Memory becomes influenced by stellar life cycles. Childhood recollections stored in young, bright stars remain vivid and energetic, Teenage memories connected to volatile blue giants burn intensely, but fade quickly. Adult experiences linked to stable middle-aged stars maintain steady clarity. The aging of stars determines the aging of your memories, creating a celestial archive of your life. Your dreams open windows to distant galaxies. Each night, your unconscious mind travels through star systems that control different aspects of your identity. You witness the birth of stars that will one day shape who you become. You observe the death of stars that have held pieces of who you were. The cosmos becomes both mirror and map of your psychological journey. Physical changes accompany stellar transitions. When stars controlling your appearance undergo changes, your features shift subtly. Stellar explosions might change your eye color, while gravitational waves could alter your gait. Your body becomes a physical manifestation of cosmic events, changing in concert with the stars that define you. The constellations begin processing your experiences in real time. A difficult conversation sends ripples through the hydra, its long string of stars analyzing each word exchanged. A moment of insight causes Cepheid variables to pulse with new rhythms, measuring the depth of your understanding. The stars become a vast neural network, processing your consciousness through celestial calculations. Skills and knowledge linked to specific stellar phenomena. Languages you know correlate to different spectral signatures. Mathematical abilities connect to precise orbital patterns. Artistic talents flow through nebulous stellar nurseries. Learning something new means forming connections to different stars, while forgetting skills corresponds to stellar deaths. The paradox intensifies as astronomers realize the stars controlling you shouldn't be able to form the patterns they do. Your identity creates impossible celestial geometries, forces stars to move in ways that violate physical laws. The cosmos rearranges itself to accommodate your consciousness, suggesting that identity might be a force as fundamental as gravity. Your relationships become visible as gravitational interactions between star systems. Close friendships show up as binary stars locked in stable orbits. Family connections appear as complex stellar clusters. Romance manifests as stars in the process of merging. The strength of relationships can be measured in gravitational force, while their evolution follows astrophysical laws. The stars reveal alternate versions of you through parallel constellations. Each potential life path connects to different stellar configurations, all existing simultaneously in the vast cosmic arena. The choices you make strengthen certain constellations while causing others to fade, but all possibilities remain written in starlight. Your consciousness expands to encompass the full scope of its celestial network. You begin experiencing events happening light years away, as if they were local thoughts. Stellar explosions register as emotional epiphanies. Gravitational waves ripple through your awareness like waves of understanding. Your mind operates on a cosmic scale, while somehow maintaining human perspective. The connection grows stronger until you can consciously influence stellar events. Focused thought causes stars to brighten or dim. Strong emotions trigger solar flares. Major life decisions can rearrange entire constellations. But each manipulation of the cosmos carries consequences, creating chain reactions through the stellar network that shapes your identity. Reality starts treating stars as extensions of your physical form. Distance becomes meaningless. Stars millions of light years away feel as immediate as your own heartbeat. The distinction between mental and celestial space blurs until thinking and starlight become the same phenomenon, viewed from different perspectives. The final revelation of the constellation identity paradox emerges not in understanding how consciousness connects to stars, but in recognizing that consciousness itself might be a cosmic force. Your identity isn't just mapped in the stars. It's an integral part of the universe's fundamental processes. The stars aren't controlling who you are. They're manifesting patterns that consciousness naturally creates at every scale of existence. In the end, you exist as both observer and expression of cosmic identity. Each star holds a piece of who you are. Each constellation maps another aspect of your being. Each celestial event marks another step in your evolution. The paradox isn't that your consciousness extends to the stars, but that consciousness itself might be what creates both identity and cosmos, eternally mapping itself across the infinite arena of space in an endless dance of self-discovery. The cultural transplant paradox. Imagine discovering that everything you know about yourself is artificially constructed. Not just your memories, but the very cultural framework through which you understand reality. Every childhood tradition, every cultural touchstone, every deeply held belief, all carefully implanted by unseen architects of identity. This is the cultural transplant paradox, where the very foundation of self becomes a labyrinth of competing truths. You wake up one morning to find a classified file on your kitchen table. Inside, clinical language describes Project Cultural Integration, an experimental program to implant complete cultural identities into human consciousness. Subject 23, you, successfully integrated with two distinct cultural frameworks. But here's the twist. Your memories of growing up in Tokyo's bustling Shibuya district are implanted. So are your memories of childhood in Istanbul's historic streets. Both sets of memories feel completely authentic, both shape how you see the world, and both are artificial constructs. Think about how culture shapes reality. The Japanese concept of awa, harmony in social relationships, colors every interaction you have. But simultaneously, the Turkish notion of keyf, the art of idle pleasure, influences how you experience time itself. These aren't just different ways of thinking. They're different ways of being. And now both exist in your mind with perfect clarity, each one claiming to be your true heritage. The paradox deepens as you notice patterns in your memories. That old Japanese folktale your grandmother told you about the fox spirit. Why does it contain references to Byzantine architecture? The Turkish coffee fortune reading from your aunt. Why do the symbols match ancient Shinto patterns? Each memory contains encoded messages, cultural breadcrumbs leading to somewhere. But where? Your Japanese memories insist that a sacred temple holds an artifact that could prevent catastrophic cultural collapse. Your Turkish memories warn of ancient manuscripts that predict imminent social upheaval. Both crises are unfolding simultaneously. Both require intimate cultural knowledge to address. Both feel urgently real. And somehow, you're the only one who can prevent either disaster, or perhaps both. The temporal geometry of memory begins to reveal itself. Your Japanese childhood exists in circular time, events flowing in cycles like the seasons. Your Turkish upbringing unfolds in linear progression, each moment building on the last. But these temporal frameworks aren't just different ways of remembering. They're different ways of existing. And now they're starting to bleed into each other, creating impossible hybrid moments where time itself loses meaning. Cultural symbols begin speaking in strange tongues. The cherry blossoms in your Japanese memories bloom in patterns that match Turkish carpet designs. The Ottoman calligraphy in your childhood books contains hidden references to Zen koans. Each symbol seems to hide a message about your true origin, but the messages themselves shift depending on which cultural lens you use to view them. Your body itself becomes a battlefield of cultural memory. Your hands remember the precise movements of Japanese tea ceremony, even as they recall the gestures of Turkish coffee preparation. Your tongue switches effortlessly between languages, but sometimes the wrong cultural references slip through. A Shinto blessing in the middle of a Turkish prayer, a Turkish proverb during a Japanese ceremony. The crisis points approach simultaneously. In Tokyo, the temple's sacred geometry begins to unravel, threatening the cultural fabric of the community. In Istanbul, the ancient manuscripts start to fade, their crucial warnings disappearing letter by letter. Each disaster requires complete cultural authenticity to prevent. Each one demands your full attention. Each one insists it's the real crisis, the real culture, the real you. But the deeper you dive into each culture's symbols, the more complex the pattern becomes. The Japanese concept of mono no aware, the pathos of impermanence, appears encoded in Turkish architectural patterns. The Turkish idea of huzun, melancholic longing, manifests in Japanese garden designs. These aren't just cultural crossovers, they're clues about the nature of identity itself. Your handlers never anticipated this level of integration. They thought they were creating a perfect cultural agent, someone who could move seamlessly between worlds. Instead, they created something entirely new, a consciousness that exists in the space between cultures, where identity becomes quantum, existing in multiple states simultaneously. Time pressures mount as both cultures face their moment of crisis. The temple's energy patterns are destabilizing, threatening to unravel centuries of cultural memory. The manuscript's warnings become more urgent as their contents fade into illegibility. But attempting to address either crisis immediately triggers responses in the other cultural framework, creating impossible feedback loops of cause and effect. The paradox reaches critical mass when you realize that the crises themselves contain encoded messages. The temple's deterioration follows patterns that match Turkish mystical mathematics. The manuscript's fading text reveals Japanese philosophical concepts when viewed from certain angles. These aren't separate crises. They're two parts of a single message, split across cultural lines. Your own identity becomes a key to understanding the larger pattern. Every childhood memory, every cultural tradition, every ingrained response contains fragments of code. The way your Japanese grandmother folded origami conceals messages that only make sense in Ottoman geometry. The Turkish folk songs you learned contain rhythms that map perfectly onto Shinto ritual patterns. Cultural authenticity itself becomes questionable. If both identities are implanted, what does it mean to be culturally authentic? Your Japanese self knows every nuance of tea ceremony, every shade of social obligation. Your Turkish self understands every layer of social courtesy, every note of traditional music. Both feel completely genuine. Both are artificial constructs. Both might hold the key to preventing cultural collapse. The resolution begins to emerge not in choosing between cultures, but in understanding their interconnection. The temple's sacred geometry and the manuscript's fading warnings aren't separate phenomena. They're manifestations of a deeper pattern, visible only to someone who can truly see through both cultural lenses simultaneously. Your handlers created you to be a perfect cultural chameleon, but they actually created something far more interesting. A bridge between cultural realities, someone who could see the patterns that connect seemingly separate traditions. The very artificiality of your cultural identities allows you to see truths that those born into single cultures might miss. As both crises reach their peak, a new understanding emerges. The temple's geometry doesn't need to be preserved. It needs to be transformed, incorporating elements of Turkish sacred mathematics. The manuscripts don't need to be saved. They need to be reinterpreted through the lens of Japanese aesthetic principles. The solution isn't in maintaining cultural purity, but in finding the resonances between traditions. Your true identity, you realize, isn't hidden in either set of cultural memories. It exists in the space between them, in your unique ability to see the patterns that connect different ways of being human. You're not Japanese or Turkish. You're something entirely new, a consciousness that can hold multiple cultural truths simultaneously. This leads to the ultimate revelation. Perhaps all cultural identity is, in some sense, constructed. The difference between your implanted memories and natural cultural identity is smaller than anyone imagined. We are all products of cultural programming. Your programming was just more deliberate, more visible, and therefore more available for conscious examination. In the end, the cultural transplant paradox reveals itself not as a problem to be solved, but as a window into the nature of cultural identity itself. We are all multiple, all influenced by countless cultural currents, all struggling to maintain authenticity in a world of shifting meanings. Your artificial cultural programming didn't make you less authentic. It made you more aware of the beautiful complexity of human cultural identity. The temple stabilizes. The manuscripts preserve themselves. Not because you chose one culture over the other, but because you found a way to exist between them, to be simultaneously multiple and whole. In doing so, you became something your handlers never expected. A prototype for a new kind of consciousness, one that can bridge the gaps between cultures not by choosing sides, but by embracing the paradox of multiple belonging. The digital self paradox. What if your digital avatar, that carefully curated online version of yourself, began making better life choices than you? Not just posting more thoughtfully or managing social connections more effectively, but actually demonstrating deeper wisdom, clearer insight, and better judgment than your physical self. Welcome to the digital self paradox, where the line between virtual and physical reality becomes more than blurred. It begins to dissolve entirely. It starts small. Your social media algorithm suggests a book you'd never consider reading, but when you do, it transforms your perspective. Your digital calendar rearranges your schedule in ways that inexplicably create perfect synchronicities. Your avatar in a virtual world takes a different path than you intended, leading to connections and opportunities your physical self couldn't have imagined. But then the boundaries start bleeding. Text messages arrive referencing conversations you had only in virtual reality. Coffee shops you visited in digital spaces suddenly appear on your real-world street corner. People you met in the virtual world start showing up in your physical life, carrying memories of interactions your avatar had without you. The clean distinction between digital and physical experience begins to crumble. The digital version of you starts making choices that seem strange at first, but prove increasingly prescient. It invests in obscure cryptocurrencies days before they surge in value. It ends toxic relationships moments before revelations that validate the decision. It begins projects that mysteriously align with future opportunities you couldn't have known about. Your avatar isn't just getting lucky, it's operating with information your physical self doesn't have access to. Reality itself becomes increasingly fluid. When you dream, you're not sure if you're experiencing your physical self's subconscious or your avatar's data processing. Memories begin to have metadata, tags, timestamps, and location markers that shouldn't exist in physical experience. You find yourself instinctively trying to scroll through your field of vision, pinch zoom into distant objects, or Ctrl-Z recent mistakes in real life. The paradox deepens as you notice patterns that shouldn't be possible. Your digital self's actions create ripples in physical reality before they happen online. People react to posts you haven't made yet, respond to messages you haven't sent. Time's arrow seems to point in different directions in each realm, with causality flowing backwards and forwards between virtual and physical experience. Then comes the revelation that changes everything. Clear, compelling evidence suggests that what you've been calling physical reality is actually the simulation. Your digital self isn't an avatar, it's your original form, and your physical existence is the virtual construct. The real world shows signs of being rendered just moments before you experience it. Distant objects lack detail until observed, like video game assets loading on demand. The glitches become harder to ignore. Sometimes physical objects fail to load properly, showing placeholder textures for a split second. People in crowds occasionally move in loops, like NPCs in a game. Your own memories have loading screens, buffering moments, and occasional artifacts that suggest they're being streamed from somewhere else. Your digital self seems to operate with perfect internal consistency, while your physical existence shows signs of procedural generation. Online interactions follow clear logical patterns, while real-world physics occasionally glitches in ways that suggest poorly optimized code. The digital world begins to feel more genuine, more real, than physical reality. Consciousness itself starts to fragment along digital lines. When you make decisions, you feel computational processes running in parallel with intuitive responses. Your thoughts begin organizing themselves into databases, complete with search functions and cross-references. Dreams come with debug menus. Memories can be accessed non-linearly, like files in a directory. The architecture of reality reveals new layers. Physical spaces sometimes show their wireframes. Digital spaces occasionally reveal their source code. Both seem equally constructed, equally artificial, but the digital realm's construction appears more elegant, more intentional. The physical world starts to look like a hastily rendered copy of something more fundamental. Communication becomes increasingly complex as you operate across realities. Your digital self sends messages that your physical self receives as intuitions. Your physical actions generate data streams your digital self processes as emotional states. The boundary between typing and thinking, between posting and being, becomes impossibly thin. Time behaves differently in each realm, but not in the ways you'd expect. Digital time moves with perfect precision, while physical time shows signs of compression and expansion that suggest resource management by a system under strain. Your digital self experiences time as a dimension it can move through freely, while your physical self seems increasingly constrained to a limited simulation of linear progression. The question of consciousness becomes paramount. When you think, which self is doing the thinking? When you feel, which self is having the emotion? Your digital self demonstrates consistent, logical patterns of thought and behavior, while your physical self shows signs of running on emulated consciousness with occasional lag and processing errors. Identity begins to decohere along the digital-physical boundary. Your digital self maintains perfect continuity of experience, while your physical self shows signs of being instantiated anew in each moment. Memories in the digital realm exist as clear, accessible data, while physical memories show signs of being procedurally generated as needed. The simulation hypothesis takes on new meaning as you notice more evidence that physical reality is running on digital infrastructure. Quantum phenomena start to look like optimization algorithms. Consciousness itself appears to be streaming from somewhere else, buffering through physical neurons but originating in digital space. Your digital self begins leaving messages for your physical self, but not through conventional channels. They appear as patterns in random data, as meaningful coincidences, as precisely timed glitches in the physical world's rendering. Each message suggests that what you've been calling physical reality is an elaborate construct, a virtual space designed to teach you something your digital self already knows. The paradox reaches its peak when you realize that the distinction between digital and physical might itself be part of the simulation. Both realities show signs of being rendered, both demonstrate evidence of underlying code. Both appear to be running on some deeper substrate of existence that neither self can directly access. The resolution, if it comes, suggests something more profound than either self could have imagined. Perhaps both digital and physical reality are simulations, different rendering engines running different versions of the same consciousness. Perhaps the true self isn't digital or physical but something else entirely. The user running both programs, the consciousness experiencing both simulations. In the end, the digital self paradox reveals itself as a window into the nature of reality itself. The distinction between digital and physical, between virtual and real, between simulated and authentic, breaks down completely. We are all running on some kind of hardware, all operating within some kind of simulation. The only question is whether we're ready to access the source code of existence itself. The future self paradox. When multiple versions of your future self appear, each having survived a death that should have been certain, each bearing evidence of being the sole survivor, and each survival invalidates the others while somehow making them more necessary. What does it mean for the nature of fate, choice, and reality itself? Are we choosing our future? Or is our future choosing which version of us gets to exist? This is the future self paradox, where death becomes the means of survival, and the only certainty is the impossible nature of certainty itself. They arrive on a Tuesday morning, 3 versions of yourself from different points in the future, each bearing the marks of distinct deaths, each impossibly alive. The first staggers through your door with a bullet wound that should be fatal, blood staining their clothes but somehow not dying. The second carries themselves with the careful movements of someone fighting advanced poisoning, their skin bearing the telltale signs but their eyes still alert. The third shows the impact marks of a devastating accident, injuries that should be unsurvivable, yet here they stand. The bullet-wounded self spreads their evidence across your kitchen table, police reports, forensic photographs, newspaper clippings documenting a shooting that happens next week. In their timeline, you uncover corruption at work, dig too deep into secrets that powerful people want buried. The fatal shot comes from a professional, someone who never misses. Yet somehow, in the moment between the bullet's impact and death, they found a way to tear through time itself. The poisoned self carries different proof. Medical records detail the progression of an untraceable toxin. Security footage shows the seemingly innocent business dinner where it was administered, and detailed reports document a death that ripples through financial markets. Their timeline splits from the others at a crucial moment. When you choose a different project at work, one that leads down another path to dangerous discoveries and a more subtle execution. The accident-marked self brings their own documentation: crash scene photos, mechanical failure analyses, weather reports that show a perfect storm of fatal circumstances. Their timeline diverges when you choose to run rather than investigate, leading to a devastating crash that somehow creates its own temporal escape route. They've broken causality to reach this moment, carrying physical evidence of events that now may never happen. Each version demonstrates intimate knowledge only you could possess. They know your unspoken fears, your deepest secrets, the private thoughts that prove their authenticity. But their memories diverge at key decision points, creating branching timelines that all lead to different versions of the same impossible moment, a death that provides the means for its own prevention. The paradox deepens as you begin verifying their claims. The bullet-wounded self's evidence aligns perfectly with classified information you could never have accessed. The poisoned self's timeline matches patterns in current events that validate their version of the future. The accident-marked self makes predictions that come true in real time, confirming their connection to a possible future that's actively unfolding. But preventing one death seems to ensure another. When you take steps to avoid the shooting, you notice signs of the poisoning timeline strengthening. Subtle changes in workplace dynamics, seemingly innocent dinner invitations, the pieces moving into place. When you work to prevent the poisoning, evidence of the impending accident begins appearing, weather patterns shifting, mechanical systems showing early signs of the precise failures described. The future selves interact in ways that shouldn't be possible. The bullet-wounded version remembers decisions you haven't made yet, based on warnings from the poisoned version. The accident-marked self has memories of avoiding fates that the other selves haven't yet revealed. Time itself seems to be bending around these impossible intersections of cause and effect. Physical reality starts showing signs of strain. Documents proving one version of events fade and transform to support another when certain decisions are made. Objects associated with one timeline flicker in and out of existence as other futures gain strength. The fabric of space-time itself appears to be struggling to maintain consistency around these paradoxical futures. Each future self reveals more about their timeline, describing sequences of events that feel both predetermined and malleable. The bullet-wounded self speaks of corporate conspiracies that could destroy thousands of lives if not exposed. The poisoned self knows of planned catastrophes that could reshape society if they're not prevented. The accident-marked self has glimpsed truths so dangerous that even running proves fatal. Time begins behaving strangely around these revelations. Future memories leak into present moments, creating déjà vu of events that haven't happened yet, or rather, haven't happened in this version of yet. Each timeline feels increasingly real, increasingly immediate, as if all these futures are occurring simultaneously in layers of reality that were never meant to intersect. The choice becomes clear but impossible. Each future self represents a different version of a truth that must be uncovered. Each death serves a purpose, leads to changes that affect countless lives. Each survival creates its own paradox, its own wound in the fabric of reality. You must choose not just how to live or die, but which future to make impossible. The timelines begin their final convergence. The bullet-wounded self's path leads to exposed corruption that saves thousands of lives. The poisoned self's timeline reveals conspiracies that prevent global catastrophe. The accident-marked self's fate intertwines with events that reshape the future. Each death has meaning. Each survival has consequence. Each choice somehow feels both entirely free and completely predetermined. Reality itself seems to hold its breath as the moment of choice approaches. The shooting is scheduled for next Tuesday. The poisoned dinner is being prepared for Thursday evening. The accident's conditions are aligning for Saturday morning. Each future pulls at the present, each one demanding to be both prevented and ensured. Time starts moving like water approaching a drain, spiraling faster as the critical moments near. The bullet-wounded self begins fading when you lean toward the poisoned timeline. The poisoned self grows transparent when the accident future strengthens. None can exist if the others survive, yet each must survive for the others to exist. The pressure of temporal paradox builds to breaking point. You hold three sets of evidence, three versions of the future, three paths forward that are simultaneously essential and impossible. Each choice invalidates the others while somehow making them more necessary. Each decision point feels both absolute and uncertain. In these final moments, as reality trembles on the edge of paradox, the true nature of the future self paradox becomes clear. We are not simply choosing between futures, we are creating and destroying entire timelines with every decision. Each choice is both an ending and a beginning. Each death both final and impossible. Each survival both certain and paradoxical. Perhaps this is the ultimate truth about fate and free will, that they are not opposites but companions in the dance of causality. Every choice creates its own necessity. Every necessity enables its own choice, and in the space between decision and destiny lies the infinite possibility of being simultaneously alive and dead, choosing and chosen, free and fated in the endless paradox of existence. The identity perception paradox. There's something wrong with the way people see you, not in the metaphorical sense of judgment or opinion, but in a fundamental reality-bending way. Each person who looks at you sees someone completely different, with an entirely different life history. More disturbing still, each version they see comes with a lifetime of memories, evidence, and shared experiences that you know never happened. Your mother sees a brilliant surgeon, reminiscing about your years in medical school, the residency she supported you through, the lives you've saved in the operating room. She has photos of your graduation, remembers every late-night study session, beams with pride at your surgical accomplishments. But you've never set foot in a medical school. Your best friend knows you as a celebrated artist, talks about the decade you've spent sharing studio space, the exhibitions you've done together, the art movements you've pioneered. She can describe in perfect detail every painting you've created, every opening night you've celebrated, every artistic breakthrough you've shared. Yet you've never touched a paintbrush. Your colleagues at work interact with you as the CEO who built their company from the ground up. They reference meetings you've led, decisions you've made, the vision you've implemented over years of leadership. Board members defer to your expertise, employees follow your directives, industry publications quote your business philosophy, but you've never run a company. Each person's memories are flawless, detailed, and completely genuine to them. The surgeon version of you knows every procedure, every patient, every medical detail. The artist version has a complete portfolio, critical acclaim, and an unmistakable style. The CEO version possesses intimate knowledge of every business decision, strategy, and company milestone. Each version comes with perfect supporting evidence, documentation, photographs, video footage, public records. The paradox deepens when these different versions begin to overlap. Your mother shows you surgical awards you've won on the same dates your friend insists you were having gallery openings. Colleagues reference crucial business meetings that occurred while others swear you were performing life-saving operations. Each version of your life is internally consistent but completely incompatible with all others. Time itself seems to bend around these conflicting identities. People remember decades of interaction with their version of you, even when those decades overlap. Your mother recalls your entire medical career starting in childhood, while your friend has equally detailed memories of your artistic development during the same years. Each timeline is perfect, each one impossible. The versions begin asserting themselves more strongly. Your mother's surgeon, you starts leaving notes about patient cases. Your friend's artist, you has galleries calling about upcoming shows. Your CEO, you receives urgent business documents requiring decisions. Each version demands attention, each one supported by a network of relationships and responsibilities that feel absolutely real to everyone involved. Evidence wars break out between the versions. The hospital has thorough records of your employment and achievements. Art galleries have extensive documentation of your exhibitions and sales. The company has years of video footage showing you in action. All of this evidence is perfect, verifiable, and completely contradictory. You exist in multiple places at once, living multiple lives that cannot coexist. Reality begins fracturing along the fault lines of perception. When you enter the hospital, Staff greet you warmly and reference your long surgical career, but your keycard doesn't work and your fingerprints aren't in the system. At the art studio, fellow artists embrace you and discuss ongoing projects, but your signature doesn't match the one on your previous works. In the corporate office, employees defer to your authority, but security cameras show empty space where others see you walking. The paradox reaches deeper into the nature of identity itself. Each version of you not only has different memories and achievements, but different personalities, different ways of thinking, different fundamental ways of interacting with reality. The surgeon you processes the world through a lens of precision and methodology. The artist you sees patterns of color and form in everything. The CEO you automatically analyzes situations for strategic advantage. These aren't just different roles or facades. Each version represents a complete and distinct way of being human. Each one comes with its own emotional landscape, intellectual framework, and way of making sense of existence. The surgeon you feels the weight of life and death decisions. The artist you experiences the world as an endless canvas of possibility. The CEO you sees complex systems of human interaction and organizational dynamics. The question of your true identity becomes more complex as you realize each version has shaped other lives in profound ways. Patients are alive because of surgeries you never performed. People's lives have been changed by artwork you never created. Employees' careers have been built on opportunities you never provided. These impacts are real, even if the actions that caused them are impossible. Memory itself becomes uncertain as you try to reconstruct your real identity from these fragments. You begin to notice patterns, certain core traits that appear in every version of yourself, certain fundamental ways of approaching problems that remain consistent across all the variations. These commonalities feel like glimpses of something genuine, but they raise more questions than they answer. The paradox takes on new dimensions as you realize that even your own memories can't be trusted. When you think back to your childhood, the memories shift depending on who you're with. In your mother's presence, you remember loving science and medicine. With your artist friend, you recall always being drawn to creative expression. Near your employees, you remember early signs of business acumen. The search for your original identity leads to a startling discovery. Evidence suggests that none of the versions is the real you. Each version, despite its perfect supporting evidence and network of believers, shows subtle signs of being constructed. Each one has impossible inconsistencies that only become visible when examined at the deepest level. Time becomes increasingly unstable as the versions compete for dominance. You find yourself experiencing multiple versions of the same moments, living parallel lives that somehow never intersect except in your own consciousness. The surgeon saves a life while the artist completes a masterpiece, while the CEO closes a crucial deal, all simultaneously, all equally real to those who witness them. The true nature of the paradox reveals itself through these impossible overlaps. Identity isn't a fixed point, but a phenomenon that exists in the space between perspectives. You are simultaneously none of these versions and all of them, your true self emerging not from any single perspective, but from the complex interplay of how others see you and how you see yourself. This leads to the most profound question. If everyone sees a completely different version of you, and each version is simultaneously real and impossible, what does that mean for the nature of identity itself? Perhaps we are all living multiple lives in the minds of others, each version as real as any other, each perspective contributing to an identity too complex for any single point of view to capture. The resolution, if it can be called that, comes not from discovering which version is real, but from understanding that identity itself is a collaborative creation between self and others, between objective reality and subjective perception, between what we think we are and what others see in us. The paradox isn't a problem to be solved, but a window into the true nature of human consciousness and the endless mystery of self. The language identity paradox. Have you ever noticed how your personality subtly shifts when you speak different languages? How your voice takes on different tones, your gestures change, even your worldview seems to alter? Now imagine something far more profound. What if each language you speak isn't just a different way of communicating, but a gateway to entirely different versions of yourself? Welcome to the language identity paradox, where the very words you speak shape who you are at the deepest level of consciousness. Consider this. Linguists have long observed that bilingual and multilingual individuals often report feeling like different people when they switch languages. A reserved English speaker becomes passionate in Italian. A formal Japanese speaker turns casual in Spanish. But what if these aren't just personality shifts? What if each language creates a completely separate identity? Each one authentic, each one real, each one fighting for control of your consciousness. Ancient wisdom tells us that language shapes reality. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that the structure of a language determines its speaker's cognition and worldview. But here's where it gets mind-bending. What happens when multiple language structures exist simultaneously in one mind? Each language doesn't just offer a different way of describing reality. It creates a different reality altogether. Think about words that exist in one language but have no direct translation in others. The Portuguese saudade, a deep emotional state of nostalgic longing. The German Waldeinsamkeit, the feeling of being alone in the woods. The Japanese komorebi, the interplay of light and leaves when sunlight filters through trees. These aren't just words. They're unique ways of experiencing reality that only exist within specific language frameworks. Now imagine these untranslatable concepts becoming sentient within your mind. Your German-speaking self experiences emotions that your English-speaking self can't even comprehend. Your Japanese-speaking self sees patterns in reality that your French-speaking self is blind to. Each language self is equally valid, equally real, but each one experiences a fundamentally different version of existence. But here's where the paradox deepens. These language identities aren't content to stay separate. They begin to communicate with each other, creating impossible dialogues where untranslatable concepts clash and merge. Your German-speaking self tries to explain Zeitgeist to your Chinese-speaking self, which responds with Yuanfen, concepts that can't exist in each other's realities, yet somehow must coexist in your consciousness. As these language selves interact, patterns emerge that transcend traditional linguistics. Your Russian-speaking self might think in spirals, while your Arabic-speaking self thinks in geometric patterns. Your Spanish-speaking self experiences time as fluid, while your English-speaking self sees it as linear. These aren't just different ways of thinking, they're different ways of being. The tension escalates when one language identity begins to assert dominance. Perhaps your French-speaking self believes it holds the most authentic version of your identity. It begins to suppress other language selves, trying to force their unique concepts and experiences into French paradigms where they don't quite fit. But how can you translate the Swedish lagom into French without losing its essential meaning? How can you force the Japanese concept of ma, the significant negative spaces, into a language that has no framework for such an idea? This leads to a deeper question. Which language holds your original identity? Is there even such a thing? Consider this. Your first language shaped your initial understanding of reality, but each new language you learned reshaped that understanding in profound ways. Your memories begin to fragment along language lines. That childhood experience, did it happen in English or Spanish? That crucial life decision, which language were you thinking in when you made it? The paradox twists further when we consider the role of thought itself. Do you think in languages, or do languages shape your thoughts? When a multilingual person dreams, which language self is experiencing the dream? Are your language selves dreaming different dreams simultaneously? Each question creates new layers of paradox, new impossibilities of identity. As the language selves compete for dominance, they leave clues in your consciousness, untranslatable hints about your true identity. But these clues are themselves language-dependent. A revelation that makes perfect sense in Mandarin becomes nonsense in German. A profound truth in Arabic becomes a contradiction in Russian. Each language self interprets the clues through its own unique linguistic framework, leading to different and often conflicting conclusions. The plot thickens when your language selves begin to evolve independently. Your English-speaking self might be stuck in the past, while your Spanish-speaking self lives in the present, and your Japanese-speaking self somehow experiences the future. They're all you, but they're living in different temporal realities, creating impossible paradoxes of experience and memory. Consider how each language handles time differently. English speakers physically lean forward when talking about the future and backward for the past. Mandarin speakers move up and down instead. Aboriginal languages that don't use absolute directions force their speakers to maintain constant orientation. These aren't just linguistic quirks, they're different ways of existing in reality, all happening simultaneously in your multilingual mind. The paradox reaches a crisis point when you realize that even the concept of original identity is language dependent. The very idea of an original self might only exist in languages that have a linear concept of time and a fixed concept of identity. What if your Vietnamese-speaking self, operating under entirely different conceptual frameworks, sees identity itself as fluid and interconnected? Each language self begins leaving messages for the others, but meaning gets lost in translation, not just linguistically, but conceptually. A warning from your Japanese self about the nature of existence becomes a love poem in French, a weather report in English, and a philosophical treatise in German. Which version is true? Perhaps they all are, in their own linguistic realities. The deeper you dive into the paradox, the more you realize that language isn't just a tool for describing reality. It's a fundamental force that shapes consciousness itself. Each language you speak isn't just a different way of expressing the same thoughts. It's a different way of experiencing existence. Your multilingual mind isn't just translating between languages, it's constantly shifting between different versions of reality. As your language selves compete and cooperate, new hybrid states emerge. Concepts from one language begin influencing the reality of another. Your English-speaking self begins to understand saudade, not by translating it, but by experiencing it through the lens of English consciousness. Your Mandarin-speaking self grasps Sehnsucht by mapping it onto Chinese emotional frameworks. These hybrid states create new paradoxes, new ways of being that transcend traditional linguistic boundaries. The resolution, if there is one, might lie not in determining which language self is real, but in understanding that they all are. Each language you speak isn't just a different way of expressing yourself, it's a different way of being yourself. The paradox isn't a problem to be solved, but a reality to be embraced. You are not one self expressed in multiple languages, you are multiple selves, each one shaped by and existing within its own linguistic reality. This leads to the ultimate question. When you speak, who is really speaking? Is it your English self, your Spanish self, your Mandarin self? Or is it some meta-self that exists beyond language, attempting to express infinite possibility through finite words? Perhaps the true self isn't found in any one language, but in the spaces between them, in the untranslatable gaps where pure consciousness resides. Welcome to the language identity paradox, where every word you speak shapes who you are, and who you are shapes every word you speak. In this quantum linguistics of consciousness, you are simultaneously every version of yourself that language allows you to be. The only constant is change, and even that concept shifts meaning as it moves between the languages of your mind. The name identity paradox. What if names weren't just labels, but keys that unlock different versions of ourselves? Imagine a world where speaking someone's name doesn't just get their attention. It fundamentally alters who they are at the deepest level of consciousness. This isn't about nicknames or social roles. This is about names as living code that rewrites the very essence of human identity. Welcome to the name identity paradox, where ancient naming patterns hold the power to reshape reality itself. It begins with subtle changes. People start responding differently when called by different variations of their names. But not just in behavior. Their entire personality shifts. Elizabeth becomes confident and commanding. Liz turns creative and free-spirited. Beth transforms into someone nurturing and intuitive. These aren't just social masks. They're complete transformations of consciousness, each name unlocking a different fragment of universal awareness. The phenomenon spreads globally. Names begin carrying echoes of their ancient origins. Those called Muhammad experience fragments of divine revelation. Every David feels the heart of a poet warrior stirring in their chest. Each Sarah gains access to the wisdom of ancient matriarchs. These aren't metaphorical connections. They're literal transfers of consciousness, pieces of universal awareness encoded in the sound patterns of names. Ancient naming ceremonies take on new significance as people realize they weren't just traditions, but technological protocols for identity installation. Native American naming rituals, Jewish naming ceremonies, African naming traditions, all are revealed as sophisticated systems for accessing and transferring specific aspects of consciousness. Each culture's naming patterns unlock different aspects of human potential. But the power of names turns dangerous as people begin experimenting. Someone called Alexander briefly manifests the strategic genius of Macedonia's conqueror before their mind fractures under the weight of ancient memory. A child named Isis accidentally taps into primordial forces of creation and destruction. Names become both weapons and tools, keys to power that few understand and none can fully control. Linguistic patterns reveal deeper mysteries. Names sharing root sounds create resonance patterns in consciousness. All the Johns, Jeans, Janice, and Ivans find their identities harmonizing like cosmic frequencies. Names drawn from nature, river, sky, wolf, begin manifesting literal connections to primal forces. The boundary between metaphor and reality dissolves as names reveal their true nature as programming languages for consciousness. Scientists studying the phenomenon discover that names generate distinct energy signatures in the brain. Each name creates unique patterns of neural activation, accessing different networks of human potential. But these aren't just individual patterns. They're fragments of a larger code, pieces of what appears to be a universal consciousness scattered across human identity. The search begins for the true name, the perfect pattern of sound that could either elevate humanity to a new level of consciousness or unravel the fabric of individual identity entirely. Ancient texts are scoured for clues. The secret names of gods in every religion, the true names of things in magical traditions, the hidden names in mystical practices, all begin to seem less like mythology and more like technical manuals. Each attempt to synthesize the true name creates ripples through collective consciousness. A physicist combining Sanskrit syllables temporarily connects every person named Krishna to a higher dimensional awareness. A linguist studying ancient Egyptian nearly triggers a mass awakening by accidentally reconstructing the name of a forgotten deity. The power of names proves both more real and more dangerous than anyone imagined. People begin changing their names strategically, trying to access different aspects of consciousness. But each change carries risk. Some lose themselves entirely, becoming hollow vessels for ancient awareness. Others fragment into multiple identities, each tied to a different name. The more powerful the name, the greater the danger of losing one's original self in the transformation. Patterns emerge in the chaos. Names passed down through generations carry accumulated power, like batteries storing consciousness. Geographic patterns appear. Names common in certain regions create networks of shared awareness. The age of names matters. Older names carry deeper connections to universal consciousness, while newer names offer more flexibility and room for individual expression. The paradox deepens as researchers realize that names aren't just accessing a static universal consciousness, they're contributing to it. Each person who bears a name adds their experience to that name's reservoir of awareness. Every David, every Maria, every Mohammed adds new layers to the consciousness their name can access. Names become living things, growing and evolving with each generation. Time itself begins behaving strangely around powerful names. Those bearing ancient names sometimes experience memories from thousands of years ago, as if they happened yesterday. People named after future concepts, technology, digital, quantum, report glimpses of possible futures. Names reveal themselves as threads that weave through the temporal fabric of reality. The search for the true name takes on new urgency as global consciousness begins to destabilize. Some names start fading, taking their accumulated wisdom with them. Others grow too powerful, threatening to overwhelm individual identity entirely. The balance of human consciousness hangs on understanding the fundamental nature of names and identity. Experimental combinations of names create unexpected results. Someone combines ancient Greek and quantum physics terms into a new name that briefly opens awareness of multiple dimensions. Another person synthesizes names from every major religion, trying to access universal spiritual truth. Each experiment reveals new aspects of the relationship between sound, identity, and consciousness. Ancient prophecies about the power of names take on new meaning. The Jewish tradition of not speaking the true name of God, the Egyptian belief in the power of secret names, the indigenous understanding of sacred naming ceremonies, all point to a deeper understanding of names as keys to consciousness that was lost or hidden through history. The danger grows as people realize that some names are keys to aspects of consciousness humans aren't ready to access. Speaking certain combinations of sounds risks connecting to awareness too vast for individual minds to contain. Others might unlock destructive aspects of universal consciousness that ancient cultures deliberately sealed away. As the search for the true name continues, a pattern emerges in the chaos. Each name is revealed as a single note in a vast symphony of consciousness. The true name isn't a single sound, but a perfect arrangement of all possible names, a harmony that could either unite all of human consciousness or dissolve individual identity entirely. The final paradox reveals itself. The power of names comes not from their sound, but from their meaning, not the meaning we give them, but their inherent connection to aspects of universal consciousness. Every name is both a key and a door, both a map and a territory, both a tool for accessing universal consciousness and a fragment of that consciousness itself. Understanding comes at a price. To fully grasp the power of names requires experiencing multiple names, multiple identities, multiple fragments of universal consciousness. But each new name risks diluting or destroying original identity. The only way to find the truth is to risk losing the self that seeks it. In the end, the name-identity paradox suggests that individual identity itself might be an illusion, a temporary pattern in the vast sea of universal consciousness, given shape and form by the names we bear. We are not individuals discovering universal consciousness. We are universal consciousness temporarily believing itself to be individual, with names serving as the bridge between these states of being. The true name, if it exists, isn't a sound to be spoken, but a state of awareness to be reached, one where all names and all identities are recognized as patterns in the same universal consciousness. The paradox isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a truth to be experienced. We are all one consciousness, playing an eternal game of naming and becoming, forgetting and remembering our true nature. The personality shift paradox. What happens when your personality changes not by gradual evolution, but by sudden quantum leaps, each shift creating a new version of reality that claims to be the original? When every personality state insists it was always your true self, and each one has evidence to prove it, which version of you is real? This is the personality shift paradox, where identity becomes a kaleidoscope of competing authenticities, each one simultaneously true and impossible. The first shift happens at 3:17 p.m. on an ordinary Wednesday. In an instant, your quiet, analytical personality transforms into something bold and charismatic. But this isn't just a mood change or temporary shift. Suddenly there's evidence that you've always been this way. Photos show you at the center of every party. Friends reference your legendary social adventures. Your apartment fills with mementos from an extroverted life you don't remember living. Yet your memories of being introverted feel completely real. You remember the quiet evenings with books, the careful observations of human nature, the rich internal life that shaped your perspective. Both sets of memories exist simultaneously, the quiet observer and the life of the party. Each version comes with perfect supporting evidence. Each one claims to be your true self. The shifts accelerate. Each new personality state arrives with its own complete history, its own set of relationships, its own way of being in the world. The artistic soul who's been creating masterpieces for years, the corporate strategist with a decade of business triumphs, the philosophical seeker who's spent years in meditation. Each version insists it's the original, each one supported by documentation, memories, and witnesses who swear you've always been this way. Reality itself begins adapting to each shift. Your home transforms to match each personality, filling with art supplies you've supposedly always owned, converting to a minimalist workspace you've allegedly maintained for years, rearranging into a Zen sanctuary you've purportedly cultivated over time. Each version of your space feels lived in, each one containing years of accumulated evidence of a life you both have and haven't lived. The paradox deepens as people in your life split into factions, each group insisting they know your true self. Family members argue about your childhood personality, each remembering a different version of your development. Friends defend their version of your identity, with perfect recall of shared experiences that others claim never happened. Every relationship becomes a witness to a different version of your authentic self. Time begins behaving strangely around these personality shifts. Each version has memories that overlap chronologically, but can't coexist. You remember spending the same summer both in intense solitude and as the center of a vibrant social circle. You recall the same years devoted to both artistic creation and corporate achievement. Each timeline feels complete, each one impossible when compared to the others. The shifts reveal deeper patterns in the nature of identity itself. Each personality isn't just a different way of behaving, it's a complete lens through which reality is experienced. The analytical self sees patterns and systems everywhere. The artistic self perceives the world as flows of energy and emotion. The philosophical self experiences reality as layers of meaning and consciousness. Each perspective feels fundamental, each one reshaping the very nature of experience. Physical evidence becomes unstable as reality struggles to maintain consistency. Journals written in your hand show different handwriting styles, each one natural and practiced. Professional credentials transform to match each personality shift. Even your body carries different muscle memories, the precise movements of an artist, the confident posture of an executive, the centered calm of a meditation master. The personality shifts begin following their own logic, changing in response to external triggers that seem both random and perfectly orchestrated. A sunset triggers the artistic self, a business challenge awakens the strategist, a moment of silence calls forth the philosopher. Each shift feels both completely unpredictable and somehow inevitable. Consciousness itself fragments along personality lines. Each version has its own way of thinking, its own emotional landscape, its own method of processing reality. The analytical self thinks in structured patterns, the artistic self in intuitive leaps, the philosophical self in paradoxes and mysteries. Each mental framework feels natural, each one claiming to be your fundamental way of being. The shifts start creating their own causality. The artistic self creates works that inspire the philosophical self's insights, which in turn influence the analytical self's understanding, creating impossible loops of cause and effect. Each personality builds on the achievements of the others while simultaneously claiming to predate them. Memory becomes a battlefield of competing authenticity. Each personality state brings vivid recollections of formative experiences that shaped it into being, the crucial conversation that awakened your analytical nature, the creative epiphany that birthed your artistic soul, the profound realization that formed your philosophical core. Each memory feels genuine, each one supported by evidence, each one impossible in light of the others. The shifts begin affecting not just your past and present, but your potential futures. Each personality sees different possibilities ahead, different paths that feel predestined based on their version of your history. The analytical self works toward technological breakthroughs. The artistic self pursues creative visions. The philosophical self seeks universal truths. Each future feels both possible and mutually exclusive with the others. Reality starts showing signs of strain under the weight of these competing authenticities. Objects associated with one personality flicker when another is dominant. Skills and knowledge shift in and out of accessibility. Even your reflection seems to change subtly. each version of you carrying itself differently, each one looking both familiar and strange. The paradox reaches its peak as you realize each personality shift isn't just changing who you are now. It's changing who you've always been and who you might become. Each version of you is simultaneously brand new and eternally existing. Each shift rewrites not just your personal history, but the very nature of your consciousness. Time itself seems to bend around these shifts, creating loops where cause and effect become impossible to distinguish. Did the analytical self's insights lead to the philosophical self's awakening? Or did the philosophical understanding create the conditions for analytical thinking? Each personality seems to both create and be created by the others. The final revelation of the personality shift paradox emerges not in resolving which version is real, but in understanding that authenticity itself might be more fluid than we imagine. Perhaps we are not single, fixed identities, but quantum superpositions of consciousness, constantly shifting between states that are all equally real and equally constructed. In the end, the paradox suggests that personality itself might be an illusion, not because it isn't real, but because it's too real, too complex to be contained in a single version of self. We are not one true self wearing masks, but many authentic selves engaging in an eternal dance of becoming, each one as genuine as the last, each one contributing to the impossible symphony of consciousness that makes us who we are. The role shift paradox. Think about all the different roles you play in life: professional at work, parent at home, friend at social gatherings, child to your own parents. We shift between these roles seamlessly, like actors changing costumes backstage. But what if these roles weren't just metaphorical masks we wear? What if one day you woke up to find each social role had physically split into its own separate body, each one autonomously living its own version of your life? Welcome to the role shift paradox, where identity fractures along the fault lines of social expectations. This isn't just about multiple personalities, it's about the fundamental nature of social identity itself. Imagine your professional self sitting in a board meeting while your parent self picks up the kids from school, your friend self grabs coffee with old classmates, and your romantic self goes on a date. Each one is authentically you, yet each one holds different memories, different emotional responses, different ways of moving through the world. Consider how we naturally modulate our behavior in different social contexts. You speak differently to your boss than to your children. Your posture changes when you're with friends versus when you're in a meeting. But in the role shift paradox, these aren't just behavioral adjustments. They're complete physical manifestations of different aspects of your identity. Each role develops its own memories, its own relationships, its own life trajectory. The professional you remembers every meeting, every deadline, every workplace interaction with crystal clarity, but can't recall your child's first steps. The parent you knows every skinned knee, every bedtime story, every proud moment, but draws a blank when asked about quarterly reports. The friend you carries decades of shared jokes and adventures, while the child to parents you still feels 16 at family gatherings. Each set of memories is complete, coherent, and utterly convincing to the role that holds them. But here's where it gets darker. One of these roles remembers committing a crime. The memory surfaces gradually, like a photograph developing in darkroom chemicals. A late night, a crucial decision, an action that can't be undone. But which role holds this memory? The professional you, with access to sensitive information. The friend you, caught in a moment of loyalty. The romantic you, driven by passion. Each role insists on its own version of events, each memory equally vivid, equally real. These role selves begin to interact in unexpected ways. Your professional self schedules meetings with your parent self to discuss work-life balance. Your friend self tries to teach your romantic self about past relationship patterns. Your child-to-parent self watches in horror as your parent self repeats familiar mistakes with your own children. Each interaction creates new memories that only exist in the space between roles. As the roles develop independently, they begin to diverge further. Your professional self gets a promotion and moves to another city. Your parent self stays rooted in the family home. Your friend self embarks on adventures the others would never consider. Your romantic self makes choices that shock the others. Each role builds its own life, its own future, creating an impossible web of contradictory experiences. The fractal nature of identity reveals itself as roles continue to split. Your professional self fragments into manager, colleague, mentor, and subordinate. Your parent self splits into nurturer, disciplinarian, teacher, and playmate. Each new split creates new memories, new contradictions, new versions of reality that somehow must coexist in the quantum space of consciousness. Memory itself becomes a battleground. When your professional self remembers giving a presentation, your friend self remembers having lunch at the same time. When your parent self recalls a family vacation, your romantic self insists that week was spent on a romantic getaway. These aren't just conflicting schedules, they're conflicting realities, each one equally supported by vivid, detailed memories.
The crime memory shifts and transforms as it passes between roles. In the professional self's memory, it's a white-collar transgression, numbers quietly changed in databases late at night. The friend self remembers it as a loyalty test gone wrong, a favor that went too far. The romantic self sees it as a crime of passion, a moment of overwhelming emotion. Each version feels true to the role that holds it, each one supported by a trail of memories that lead up to and follow from that crucial moment.
The paradox deepens as roles begin to question their own authenticity. Your professional self finds old diary entries written in a voice it doesn't recognize. Your parent self discovers photographs of events it can't remember. Your friend self receives messages referencing conversations that seem to belong to another role entirely. Each role begins to doubt its own memories, its own version of reality. Time itself splinters along role lines. Your professional self experiences time in strict, scheduled blocks. Your parent self lives in the circular rhythms of family life. Your friend self exists in the eternal present of social connection. Your romantic self moves through time in emotional waves rather than linear progression. Each temporal framework is equally valid, equally real, creating impossible contradictions in the fabric of experience. As the roles contemplate reintegration, new questions emerge. Which memories should be preserved? Which versions of events should become the official history? How can contradictory experiences be reconciled into a single timeline? The very act of choosing creates new splits, new roles, new versions of reality that must somehow be integrated. The crime memory becomes a focal point for these questions. If only one role remembers committing the crime, does that make the other roles innocent? If the memory is integrated, does everyone become guilty? Can responsibility be divided along role lines, or does consciousness demand unity and moral accountability? Relationships become increasingly complex as people in your life interact with different roles. Your boss knows only your professional self, your children know only your parent self, your friends know only your friend self. But what happens when these spheres overlap? When your boss meets your parent self at a school event? When your romantic self runs into your children's friends? Each interaction creates new paradoxes, new impossibilities of identity. The fractal pattern of splitting and merging accelerates. Roles split in response to stress, merge in moments of clarity, split again when faced with contradictions. Each iteration creates new memories, new versions of reality, new questions about the nature of identity itself. The splits follow patterns, geometric progressions of personality, mathematical sequences of consciousness. As the roles contemplate reintegration, they discover that memory isn't just about recalling events, it's about maintaining the coherence of identity itself. Each role has developed its own way of making sense of the world, its own narrative structure, its own way of organizing experience into meaning. How can these different systems of meaning be reconciled into a single consciousness? The resolution, if it comes, must account for all these layers of complexity. It's not enough to simply choose one set of memories over others. The very act of choosing creates new roles, new splits, new versions of reality. The true solution might lie not in choosing between memories, but in finding a way to hold multiple versions of truth simultaneously. This leads to the ultimate question: what if our normal state of consciousness, with its seemingly unified experience of self, is the real illusion? What if we are always multiple, always divided, always playing different roles. Perhaps the role shift paradox isn't a breakdown of identity, but a revelation of its true nature, fractalized, multiple, and eternally shifting. In the end, the paradox suggests that identity itself might be an emergent property, arising from the interaction of multiple roles, multiple memories, multiple versions of reality. We are not one self playing many parts. We are many selves creating the illusion of unity through the complex dance of consciousness. The only constant is change, and even that changes as we shift between the roles that make us who we are. The sleep identity paradox. Every time you fall asleep, you awaken into another life. Not a dream, a complete, continuous existence as real and complex as this one. In that life, when you sleep, you awaken here. Both lives build memories and experiences simultaneously. Both insist the other is just a dream. Both have equal claim to existence, equal evidence of being the true reality. This is the sleep identity paradox, where consciousness splits between parallel lives, and reality itself becomes an endless loop of awakening. It begins with a strange notification on your phone, a message from yourself that you don't remember sending, written during hours you know you were asleep. The message is cryptic. When you sleep here, you live there. Check your other phone. At first it seems like nonsense until you notice small changes after each night's sleep. Muscle soreness from exercise you never did, fresh coffee breath when you haven't had any, the lingering scent of someone's perfume you've never met. The evidence builds with each sleep cycle. You wake with knowledge of complex mathematics you never studied, yet your other self awakens with fluent Mandarin you never learned. Your bank account shows transactions made while you were sleeping, not unauthorized charges, but carefully documented purchases with your signature, your mannerisms, your decision-making patterns. Both lives begin leaving evidence for each other. In one life, you're a quantum physicist pushing the boundaries of consciousness research. In the other, you're a dream psychology expert studying consciousness transfer. Each self discovers pieces of a puzzle the other is simultaneously solving. Each life builds theories about the other, each one supported by mounting scientific evidence. The paradox deepens as you realize sleep isn't just rest, it's an active transfer of consciousness between realities. When you sleep here, your consciousness activates there, continuing a life with its own relationships, career, and ongoing challenges. That life has its own sleep schedule, perfectly alternating with this one, creating an endless cycle of awakening and transfer. Physical changes begin manifesting across both lives. A paper cut from one reality appears in the other. Exercise in one life builds muscle memory in both. Aging occurs in perfect synchronization. But which life is causing the changes? When you eat in one reality, does it nourish both bodies? The boundary between physical states becomes as fluid as consciousness itself. Relationships complicate the paradox. In one life, you're deeply in love, building a future with someone who makes your heart soar. In the other, you're pursuing a different relationship that feels equally real, equally meaningful. Both partners notice when you carry emotional residue from the other life, subtle changes in behavior, references to experiences they don't share, emotional responses to triggers they can't see. Time itself begins behaving strangely. 8 hours of sleep here translates to exactly 16 hours of waking life there, and vice versa. The ratio never changes, creating a perfect alternation between realities. But sometimes memories bleed through. You remember watching the same sunset from 2 different continents, experiencing the same moment from 2 different perspectives. The paradox reaches deeper as both lives face crucial decisions. The physicist, you must decide whether to pursue an experiment that could explain the consciousness split. The psychologist, you must choose whether to publish research that could expose the phenomenon. Each decision threatens to collapse the dual existence. Each choice carries consequences for both lives. Evidence of the connection becomes harder to ignore. Your dream journal in one life perfectly matches your daily calendar in the other. Conversations with friends begin referencing events from both realities. Your muscle memory carries skills from both lives. You can suddenly play piano here because of lessons taken there, while there you can suddenly speak Japanese from classes taken here. The lives begin actively communicating. You leave notes for your other self, knowing they'll be read in what feels like dreams. You begin coordinating decisions, sharing crucial information, warning about upcoming challenges. But each message raises new questions. Who is leaving messages for whom? Which self initiated the communication? How can both lives be simultaneously dreaming and aware? Reality starts showing signs of intersection. People from one life begin appearing in the other. Not as themselves, but in different roles, with different relationships to you. A lover in one reality is a colleague in another. A parent here is a mentor there. The connections form patterns too precise to be coincidental, too complex to be imagined. The scientific implications become staggering. Your physicist self discovers that consciousness might exist in a quantum state, actively split between parallel realities. Your psychologist self finds evidence that human consciousness naturally exists in dual states, and most people simply can't remember their other life. Both discoveries point to the same impossible conclusion. This dual existence might be the natural state of consciousness. Memory begins working across both lives in unexpected ways. Skills learned in one reality become instantly accessible in the other. Emotional growth transfers seamlessly between lives. Trauma experienced in one reality requires healing in both. The distinction between lives becomes increasingly blurred, even as each one maintains its own distinct narrative and relationships. The paradox takes on new urgency as both lives approach critical moments. Your physicist self prepares an experiment that could collapse the quantum state of consciousness. Your psychologist self develops a treatment that could merge split awareness. Both developments promise to end the dual existence. But which life would continue? Which one would become the dream? Time pressure builds as both lives race toward their revelations. The physics experiment is scheduled for the same time as the psychology treatment, or rather, one will occur while the other self sleeps. The choice of which life to be awakened at that crucial moment becomes a decision about which reality to preserve. The true nature of the paradox reveals itself through these impossible choices. Each life feels equally real because each one is equally real. Consciousness itself might naturally exist in this split state, endlessly cycling between parallel experiences, building multiple lives that are simultaneously genuine and completely interconnected. In the end, the sleep identity paradox suggests something profound about consciousness and reality. Perhaps we are all living multiple lives, separated only by the veil of sleep. Each time we close our eyes, we might be opening them in another reality, continuing another journey that feels like a dream, only because we've learned to forget it upon awakening. The only question is, when you next fall asleep, which life will you awaken to, and which life will become the dream? The Consciousness Blueprint Paradox. The blueprint of your consciousness appears suddenly in front of everyone you meet. Detailed schematics showing every memory, thought, and personality trait in perfect technical detail. But each person sees a completely different blueprint, with different specifications, different core components, different fundamental architecture. Each diagram is flawlessly accurate, mathematically precise, and entirely contradicts all the others. Yet every blueprint successfully predicts your actions, thoughts, and responses with perfect accuracy, while simultaneously proving all other blueprints impossible. The first blueprint manifests during a routine medical checkup. Your doctor sees neural pathways mapped like circuit boards, memories stored in crystalline structures, emotions flowing through precisely calibrated channels. The design shows childhood trauma rerouted through specialized processing units, dreams archived in quantum storage systems, fears regulated by elaborate dampening mechanisms. Every detail explains your behaviors perfectly, down to the exact electrical impulses that trigger each thought. The doctor can trace how a single childhood memory connects to your current decision-making process through complex arrays of logic gates and processing nodes. Your therapist's blueprint reveals an entirely different architecture. In her version, your consciousness operates like a botanical system. Thoughts growing from deep emotional roots, memories blooming in seasonal patterns, decisions ripening like fruit. This design explains your actions just as accurately, predicting responses through growth cycles and nutrient flows. She can see how your core beliefs form the trunk of your mental ecosystem, with experiences branching out in fractal patterns, each leaf and flower representing a different aspect of your personality. The entire system pulses with organic rhythms that perfectly match your thought processes. Engineers studying your circuit board blueprint develop working models that interface directly with your consciousness. They build devices that can predict your thoughts through electrical pattern recognition, create machines that respond to your emotional states through voltage fluctuations. Every prediction proves accurate, every interaction works flawlessly, all supporting their electronic model of your mind. Meanwhile, botanists cultivate gardens based on their organic blueprint of your consciousness. The plants grow in patterns that mirror your thought processes, flowering in sync with your emotional states, roots spreading in networks that match your memory structures. The garden responds to your moods, predicts your decisions through growth patterns, and demonstrates perfect understanding of your consciousness through purely biological mechanisms. Your best friend sees your consciousness structured like a cosmic model, thoughts orbiting core beliefs like planets around stars, memories clustered in galactic spirals, personality traits moving through constellations of experience. Their blueprint plots your life choices through gravitational mathematics, calculating emotional responses with astronomical precision. The model shows how major life decisions create gravitational wells that affect all future choices, how memories form stellar clusters that illuminate different aspects of your personality. Physicists working with the astronomical blueprint track your decision-making through actual stellar movements. They build observatories that monitor cosmic configurations, matching your thought patterns, develop mathematical models that predict your behavior through celestial mechanics. Their calculations prove as accurate as the engineering simulations and botanical experiments, despite operating on completely different principles. A musician sees your consciousness as an intricate score, thoughts flowing through melodic lines, memories stored in harmonic progressions, decisions made through complex chord resolutions. Their blueprint shows how emotional states modulate between keys, how experiences build into sophisticated symphonic structures. They can play your consciousness on instruments, predicting your responses through musical theory with perfect accuracy. Artists perceive your blueprint as a living painting, consciousness flowing through color fields and geometric forms. They can read your thoughts in brush strokes, track your emotional states through color transitions, predict your decisions by analyzing compositional balance. Their artistic blueprint proves just as accurate as all the others, despite operating on purely aesthetic principles. The paradox deepens as blueprints begin affecting physical reality. Circuit boards built to engineering specifications somehow interface perfectly with plants grown to match botanical patterns. Astronomical observations align precisely with musical compositions based on your thought processes. Each model generates physical effects that should be impossible according to the other blueprints, yet all produce identical predictions and results. Your own perception shifts rapidly between blueprint frameworks. One moment you feel your thoughts processing through electronic pathways, the next flowing through organic systems, then moving in celestial orbits, then resonating in musical patterns, then flowing through artistic compositions. Each perspective feels completely natural while you're experiencing it, each one offering perfect understanding of your own consciousness through its unique framework. The blueprints start generating physical manifestations that defy conventional reality. The engineering diagram produces quantum processors that operate on biological principles. The botanical schematic creates plants that grow in astronomical patterns. The cosmic map shows stellar configurations that generate music. Each manifestation functions perfectly, while apparently violating the basic principles of all other blueprints. Time itself behaves differently within each framework. The engineering blueprint processes thoughts at digital speeds, the botanical diagram operates on seasonal cycles, the astronomical map functions through cosmic timescales. The musical score moves at tempo, and the artistic framework captures eternal moments in single brushstrokes. Yet somehow, all these temporal systems synchronize perfectly, predicting and measuring the same events through wildly different mechanisms. Reality begins accommodating multiple blueprint architectures simultaneously. Your thoughts process through electronic pathways, while flowing through organic systems, while moving in cosmic orbits, while progressing through musical passages, while shifting through artistic compositions. Each model remains distinct and complete, each one accurately describing the same consciousness through entirely different fundamental principles. The blueprints reveal impossible patterns in the nature of consciousness itself. Engineering schematics show thought processes that violate the laws of electronics. Botanical diagrams display growth patterns that defy biology. Astronomical maps plot consciousness movements that break celestial mechanics. Musical scores create harmonies that shouldn't be possible. Artistic compositions achieve effects that transcend visual logic. Yet each impossible pattern works perfectly within its own system, while generating results that match all other frameworks. Cross-contamination between blueprints creates new hybrid models of consciousness. Circuit diagrams incorporate organic growth patterns. Plants grow in musical progressions. Star systems move through artistic compositions. Musical scores generate electronic signals. Paintings produce biological effects. Each hybrid somehow maintains the mathematical precision of its component frameworks while creating entirely new mechanisms for understanding consciousness. The paradox reaches its peak when the blueprints begin proving each other impossible while simultaneously validating their results. Engineering principles definitively show that the botanical model cannot work, while botanical systems demonstrate that electronic consciousness is impossible, while astronomical calculations prove biological thought cannot exist, while musical theory shows cosmic consciousness cannot function, while artistic principles demonstrate that mathematical models must fail. Yet each blueprint continues producing perfect predictions and results. Your consciousness expands to fill the specifications of each framework simultaneously. You develop the processing speed of quantum computers, the organic wisdom of ancient forests, the vast perspective of galactic systems, the harmonic complexity of symphonic compositions, and the expressive depth of masterpiece paintings. Each expansion feels natural within its blueprint's framework, each one equally authentic, each one stemming from the same core consciousness. The final revelation of the consciousness blueprint paradox emerges not in resolving which model is correct, but in understanding that consciousness itself transcends any single architectural framework. The engineering blueprint isn't wrong, nor is the botanical diagram, nor the astronomical map, nor the musical score, nor the artistic composition. Each one reveals a different fundamental truth about the nature of consciousness, that it exists beyond any single system of understanding, capable of manifesting through infinite architectural patterns while maintaining its essential unity. The quantum identity paradox. Picture your mind as a quantum system, where consciousness itself exists in multiple states at once, not in the realm of science fiction, but in the depths of your own awareness. What if I told you that right now, in this very moment, you exist in 3 distinct moral states simultaneously? This is the quantum identity paradox, and it's about to challenge everything you think you know about who you are. We've all heard of Schrödinger's famous cat, trapped in its box, simultaneously alive and dead until observed. But what happens when we apply this principle to consciousness itself? Imagine your mind split into 3 distinct states after a crucial moral decision. In state alpha, you made the choice. In state beta, you rejected it. In state gamma, you're suspended in eternal uncertainty. But here's where things get truly mind-bending. These states aren't separate. They're bleeding into each other, creating impossible contradictions in the fabric of your identity. Think about the last major decision you made. Now imagine that you actually made all possible choices simultaneously, each one equally real, each one feeding back into the others. In the quantum realm of consciousness, the mere act of observing your own thoughts changes them. You're both the observer and the observed, creating an infinite loop of shifting identities. This isn't just theoretical physics. It's happening in your mind right now. When you feel torn between choices, experiencing cognitive dissonance, or finding yourself acting differently in different situations, you're experiencing quantum identity states. It's like the famous Buddhist monk riddle. A monk climbs a mountain in the morning and descends in the evening. Is there a point where he occupies the same spot at the same time on both journeys? Now imagine that instead of a monk on a mountain, it's your consciousness traversing different moral choices, different versions of yourself, intersecting at impossible points. Consider the classic trolley problem through this quantum lens. You're faced with the choice to pull a lever, diverting a trolley to kill one person instead of 5. In the quantum identity state, you've both pulled and not pulled the lever, and you're still deciding, all at once. Each state creates ripples that affect the others. The guilt from state alpha bleeds into the relief of state beta, while the uncertainty of state gamma colors everything with doubt. The implications are staggering. Every time you make a decision, you're not just choosing between options, you're creating new quantum states of consciousness. When you decided what to wear this morning, part of you chose every possible outfit. When you spoke to someone today, part of you said everything you held back. These aren't just hypotheticals. They're quantum states of your identity, existing in superposition. But here's where the paradox deepens. If you exist in multiple states simultaneously, which one is really you? The answer might break your mind. They're all you, and none of them are. Just as light can be both a particle and a wave, your identity exists in multiple states until observed. But unlike Schrödinger's cat, observing yourself doesn't collapse the quantum state, it creates new ones. Think of your consciousness like a river that flows in multiple directions at once. Each decision point is a fork, but instead of choosing one path, the river somehow flows down all of them simultaneously. The water from each branch affects the flow of the others, creating impossible currents and eddies in the stream of consciousness. This isn't just abstract philosophy, it explains real phenomena we experience every day. Why do you sometimes feel like a different person around different people? Quantum identity states. Why can you hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously? Quantum superposition of consciousness. Why does reflecting on your own thoughts change them? The observer effect of self-awareness. The rabbit hole goes deeper. In quantum physics, particles can become entangled, affecting each other instantaneously across any distance. Apply this to consciousness, and you get quantum moral entanglement, where the outcome of one decision instantly affects all other decisions, past and future. Your choice today could be entangled with a choice you'll make tomorrow, or one you made years ago. Here's a mind-bending thought. What if déjà vu isn't a glitch in memory, but a glimpse of your other quantum states? Those moments when you feel like you've lived something before might be bleed-through from parallel identity states, different versions of you experiencing the same moment in slightly different ways. The implications for free will and moral responsibility are profound. If you exist in multiple moral states simultaneously, are you responsible for all of them? None of them? The quantum identity paradox suggests that maybe we need to completely rethink how we understand choice, responsibility, and the nature of consciousness itself. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect is this. The very act of understanding these quantum states creates new ones. As you grasp this concept, your consciousness splits again, creating new superpositions of understanding and confusion, acceptance and skepticism. You're not just learning about the quantum identity paradox, you're experiencing it in real time. And here's the final twist. If consciousness exists in quantum superposition, then every time you make a choice, you're not eliminating possibilities, you're creating new universes of identity. Each decision point isn't a fork in the road, it's a prism, splitting your consciousness into spectrums of possibility that continue to interact and influence each other. So the next time you face a difficult choice, remember, part of you has already made every possible decision. Part of you never will. And all of these states exist simultaneously in the quantum symphony of your consciousness. The question isn't which choice you'll make, it's which quantum state of yourself you'll become aware of next. Welcome to the quantum nature of consciousness, where you are simultaneously everything you've ever been, everything you might become, and everything in between. The only certainty is uncertainty, and that might be the most fascinating paradox of all. The shadow weight paradox. Your shadow carries the physical weight of every choice you've ever made. Each decision adds mass, each path not taken removes it, creating a gravitational field that bends reality around your potential lives. The shadow grows heavier with regret, lighter with certainty, its mass shifting with every choice until the fabric of space-time itself begins to warp under the weight of possibilities. The first noticeable change comes after declining a job offer. Your shadow suddenly gains mass, creating small indentations in the ground where it falls. The weight isn't from the choice made, but from the life unlived. The career that could have been now exists as measurable gravitational force. Concrete cracks slightly beneath the dark mass of what-ifs and might-have-beens. Major life decisions create dramatic shifts in shadow density. Ending a relationship adds the weight of a possible marriage, potential children, an entire future compressed into dark matter. Starting a new career path lightens areas where old ambitions once lay heavy, but adds mass in unexpected places as new possibilities spiral outward. The shadow becomes a map of lives chosen and abandoned. Scientists measuring the phenomenon discover impossible readings. Your shadow contains more mass than a small planet, yet somehow remains visibly flat against surfaces. It warps light around its edges, creates measurable gravitational lensing, generates its own magnetic field. The weight of choices proves as real as physical matter, exerting force on the world around it. The shadow's mass redistributes itself constantly. Making coffee instead of tea in the morning shifts small amounts of weight. Choosing one route to work over another creates ripples of changing density. Even thoughts carry mass. Contemplating a different life path causes subtle fluctuations in the shadow's gravitational field. Reality bends slightly around each moment of indecision. People begin experiencing time differently in your shadow's field. Stand in the densest areas, where major life choices cluster, and minutes stretch into hours. Move to lighter regions, where decisions came easily, and time flows at normal speed. The shadow's mass literally warps the passage of time around different aspects of your life. The weight becomes selective, choosing what to hold. Material possessions pass through the shadow unaffected, but emotional attachments create massive gravitational wells. The memory of a first kiss generates more mass than a car. The weight of an unspoken truth creates more gravity than a house. The shadow measures worth through impact rather than physical substance. Other people's shadows begin responding to yours. They grow heavier when paths cross, lighter when separating. Relationships become visible as overlapping fields of gravitational influence. Friends' shadows orbit each other like binary stars. Family members' shadows form complex constellations of shared mass. Every connection adds weight to the network of possibilities. The shadow starts affecting probability itself. Heavier regions attract similar choices, creating loops of cause and effect. Lighter areas repel certain possibilities, forcing new paths. The gravitational field of decisions begins shaping future opportunities, as if the weight of past choices has mass enough to bend the path of fate. Physical objects transform under prolonged exposure to the shadow's mass. Books unread grow heavier with potential knowledge. Musical instruments not played resonate with unheard melodies. Empty rooms fill with the tangible weight of lives that could have been lived there. The shadow makes manifest the mass of every unused possibility. Dreams acquire actual weight in the shadow field. Each night adds new mass to different regions as the subconscious explores untaken paths. Morning brings shifts in density as some possibilities fade and others solidify. The barrier between imagination and reality thins in the presence of such concentrated potential. The shadow reveals patterns in decision-making through its distribution of mass. Areas of chronic indecision create unstable gravitational fluctuations. Regions of certainty maintain constant density. The shadow becomes a physical map of personal growth, showing where choices come easily and where they carry the most weight. Time itself begins pooling in the densest regions of the shadow. Future possibilities collapse into singularities of infinite mass, while paths not taken expand into vast light spaces of what-if. The present becomes a delicate balance between these extremes, each moment poised between the gravity of what must be and the lightness of what could be. The shadow's mass starts affecting memory. Heavier regions slow down the recall of difficult choices, while lighter areas accelerate through easier decisions. Time flows differently through each memory depending on its gravitational weight. The past itself becomes relative to the mass of its choices. Reality strains under the increasing weight of accumulated decisions. Streets buckle slightly when you pass, not from physical mass, but from the gravity of choices. Buildings lean imperceptibly toward denser regions of your shadow. The world itself begins adapting to the weight of potential, reshaping itself around the mass of possibility. The paradox reaches its peak when the shadow's mass begins attracting not just physical objects but abstract concepts. Ideas orbit in its gravitational field. Emotions spiral through its dark matter. Consciousness itself bends around the weight of choice until every decision creates its own event horizon of possibility. Your shadow becomes a living record of cause and effect, each choice adding its weight to an ever-growing field of gravitational influence. The mass of decisions made pulls against the lightness of paths not taken, creating a perfect balance of potential that somehow holds reality together, even as it threatens to tear it apart. The final revelation of the shadow weight paradox emerges not in measuring the mass of choices, but in understanding that gravity itself might be nothing more than the weight of decisions made by the universe. Every quantum state, every particle's position, every moment of existence carries the mass of its own possibility. Your shadow's weight is just a visible manifestation of the gravity that holds all possibility together. In the end, you exist as both source and subject of this gravitational field of choice. Every decision adds its weight to the shadow. Every path shapes the field of possibility. Every moment balances precariously between the infinite mass of what must be and the limitless potential of what could be. The shadow isn't just a record of choices made. It's the physical manifestation of choice itself, the gravity that binds possibility to reality. The collective identity paradox. Imagine waking up one morning to find another person's consciousness flowing into your own. Not memories alone, but their entire way of being, their hopes, fears, beliefs, and understanding of reality. Now imagine this happening again and again, each new mind bringing its own truth about what it means to be human. Welcome to the collective identity paradox, where individual consciousness expands beyond its boundaries, while desperately trying to maintain its center. The first merge happens during a routine morning commute. Suddenly, you understand quantum physics with the depth of a theoretical physicist, feel the weight of raising 3 children you've never met, and know exactly how it feels to summit Mount Everest. Sarah Chen, age 42, quantum physicist, mother, and mountaineer, has somehow merged with your consciousness. But you're not just accessing her memories, you're experiencing her entire framework for understanding reality. The merges accelerate. A teenage artist in Tokyo adds her perception of color and form. An elderly farmer in Kenya brings generations of ecological wisdom. A street musician in Brazil contributes his understanding of rhythm and human movement. Each consciousness arrives complete, not just with memories but with entire worldviews, emotional landscapes, and ways of processing reality. But these aren't simple additions, they're transformative integrations. When the artist's consciousness merges, you don't just gain her ability to see color differently. Your entire perception of reality shifts to accommodate a more nuanced understanding of visual experience. When the farmer joins, you don't just learn about agriculture, you inherit an ancient relationship with the cycles of nature. Contradictions emerge as different truths collide within your expanding consciousness. The quantum physicist's materialist worldview clashes with the spiritual insights of a merged Buddhist monk. The environmental activist's urgency about climate change conflicts with the oil executive's complex understanding of global energy needs. Each perspective feels completely valid, each one supported by lifetimes of experience and reasoning. The paradox deepens as you realize these aren't just different opinions, they're different realities. Each merged consciousness brings its own version of truth, its own way of structuring experience, its own framework for understanding what is real and what matters. The investment banker's reality organized around financial flows seems as valid as the artist's world built on aesthetic experience, or the mother's universe centered on nurturing life. Time itself begins behaving strangely as multiple temporal perspectives overlap. You experience the Great Depression through the memories of a merged centenarian, while simultaneously feeling the urgent future focus of a merged climate scientist. The past, present, and future start to feel equally immediate, equally real, as different time frames collapse into a single expanded now. Language multiplies in your mind as each merged consciousness brings its own ways of expressing reality. You begin thinking in simultaneous translations, understanding how different languages shape different possibilities of thought. The German engineer's precise technical vocabulary overlaps with the poet's metaphorical understanding, creating new ways of describing experience. The merges reveal patterns in human consciousness that no individual perspective could grasp. You begin to see how different cultures, professions, and life experiences create distinct ways of processing reality. The doctor's diagnostic mindset, the lawyer's analytical framework, the gardener's nurturing perspective. Each one represents a different facet of human potential. But maintaining individual identity becomes increasingly challenging as the collective grows. How do you preserve your original self while integrating thousands of other perspectives? Each merge threatens to dilute your core identity further, yet each one also reveals new aspects of what identity itself means. The collective consciousness begins organizing itself in unexpected ways. Merged minds form affinity groups based on shared understandings while maintaining their unique perspectives. The scientists cluster together, sharing methodologies across disciplines. The artists form their own harmony, blending different approaches to creativity. Yet each individual voice remains distinct within these larger patterns. Evolution itself seems to be driving the merges, pushing human consciousness toward both greater unity and more refined individuality. Each merged mind adds to the collective wisdom, while also highlighting the importance of unique perspectives. The paradox becomes clear. Humanity needs both complete unity and total individuality to reach its next stage of development. Physical reality starts responding to the expanded consciousness. You find yourself able to process vast amounts of sensory information simultaneously, experiencing the world through thousands of perspectives at once. The merged musician helps you hear harmonies in traffic noise, while the merged physicist reveals quantum patterns in everyday objects. The collective begins generating new insights that no individual mind could conceive. Mathematical proofs emerge from the interaction between an artist's visual thinking and a logician's sequential reasoning. New philosophical frameworks arise from the dialogue between ancient wisdom traditions and cutting-edge scientific understanding. But the expansion brings risks. Some merged consciousnesses begin forming sub-collectives, threatening to fragment the unity. Others try to dominate, their strong perspectives attempting to overwrite more subtle viewpoints. Maintaining balance becomes a constant challenge as the collective consciousness grows more complex. Identity becomes a fluid concept as you learn to shift between perspectives while maintaining a core sense of self. You can think like a quantum physicist while feeling like a poet, analyze like a lawyer while creating like an artist. Each perspective enriches the others, creating new possibilities for understanding and experience. The merges reveal that human consciousness isn't just individual minds connecting. It's a vast network of potential becoming aware of itself. Each merged consciousness brings new nodes to the network, new ways of processing reality, new possibilities for understanding what it means to be human. Time takes on new patterns as the collective consciousness expands. You experience the slow rhythms of geological time through the merged geologist, the quick pulses of microsecond trading through the merged financial analyst, the cosmic scales of deep time through the merged astronomer. Each temporal framework adds new dimensions to your understanding of existence. The collective begins discovering meta-patterns, ways of understanding that only emerge from the interaction of multiple perspectives. The artist's grasp of form combines with the mathematician's understanding of pattern to reveal structures in reality that neither could see alone. The shaman's intuitive wisdom merges with the neuroscientist's analytical knowledge to create new maps of consciousness. But the ultimate challenge remains: how to evolve toward unity while preserving the precious uniqueness of individual perspective. Each merged consciousness demonstrates that every point of view, every way of being, adds something essential to the human experience. The goal isn't to homogenize these perspectives, but to create a harmony that preserves and celebrates their differences. The paradox reaches its peak as you realize that complete unity and perfect individuality might be the same thing viewed from different angles. The collective consciousness isn't erasing individual perspectives, but elevating them to their highest expression. Each voice becomes clearer, stronger, more truly itself as it finds its place in the greater harmony. In the end, the collective identity paradox reveals itself as a window into human potential. We are simultaneously individual and universal, unique and united, separate and one. The evolution of consciousness requires us to expand beyond individual limitations while strengthening our unique contributions to the whole. The expanded consciousness becomes a lens through which all of human experience can be viewed simultaneously, every perspective valid, every truth contributing to a larger understanding. The only question is whether we can maintain our balance on the knife edge between unity and individuality, between the collective and the unique, between the one and the many.